Live. Okay, let me run over to YouTube, do my thing over at YouTube, getting on to live stream. I swear this is like so unnecessarily complicated. Okay, almost there. Sit tight, everybody. I am getting it figured out here. Well, let's see. June 8th. Okay. Yes, Doug is here. Hello, Doug. Cecilia is here. Overcoming Understanding is here. Hello, hello, hello. You know, somebody the other day was made a comment when I say hello that it reminded them of the movie A Fish Called Wanda. And I began thinking, I'm like, where did I get that from? Like the whole hello. And it was from Seinfeld. There was an episode where he was dating a girl and her stomach it would growl at night. And so he made up this whole thing that her stomach was talking to him. It was a pretty funny episode. I did not even connect that for like the longest time, but that's where I got that from. Yeah, it was funny. And so then in the episode, so like everybody starts doing it, right? Like Kramer and Elaine and George, like everybody's doing the voice of hello. And so then they tell the girl, his girlfriend, that, and she of course is like incredibly offended, like that's not funny at all, and then gives Jerry an ultimatum as to whether or not like he can stop doing the voice or he can keep seeing her, and he can't stop doing the voice, and so he like he goes over to her apartment and he just says hello, and then that ends their relationship. So yeah, funny. Let's see. Annie is here. Hello. And Hippie Go Lucky is here. And I know we've got people from the support group that are making their way over. Hopefully they can figure it out. JJ Bench is here. Trisha is here. M. Fisher is here. Overcoming Understanding says her cat is lying on the keyboard and making it hard to type. That's what they do. Cats don't care. Cats don't care about your typing. Cats just care about themselves. You have a narcissist for a cat. That's all. Cats are narcissists. I think. So how has everybody's week been going? Anything new and exciting? Nora is here. Marie is here. Hello. T. Bella V says that she thinks her cat is a narc. Yeah, they are. They're lucky they're so cute and cuddly and amazing. They can be selfish and self-absorbed. It's okay. Monica says, best week ever. What? That's amazing. I love to hear that. Camping Fool 59 says, great week. Kai Cools is here. Asks, how much have I missed? Nothing, really. I've been talking about Seinfeld. Totally unrelated. So, yeah. Cecilia says, I'm having a great time in my bicycle gang and I'm making lots of friends. That's awesome. I love that. I love to hear that. That's awesome. Good people. That's even better. Like a bicycle gang full of good people. Like that's yay. Yay. Monica saying she turned a corner. Finally. Awesome. Nora says, you are such an inspiration. Thank you for all your help. Well, thank you for your kind words. That's really nice. And you are very much welcome. Oh, snap. Overcoming Understanding says, let's talk about a narcissist's recklessness with money. I just found out my wannabe rockstar ex just spent $10,000 to be part of a big festival. Insanity. Yeah, well, hopefully it's his $10,000. But yeah, that's what they do. It's instant gratification, live in the moment kind of people. Hippie Go Lucky has been tie-dyeing like crazy. That's awesome. That's really cool. She's going full hippie. I like it. So let's see what else is going on. I have a question. I promised I would answer. Let's see. Let me get here. Oh, Monica says, for 2 months, I slept with Dana in my earbuds all night long. All night long. Wow. I'm humbled and honored, and I'm glad that I was able to be that for you when you really needed it. And I am working on some like meditation videos. I'll be putting them up on YouTube as I get them done. But things that are more relaxing and peaceful for people to fall asleep to, because I know that a lot of people, you know, they are listening to these videos. I think it's kind of that, and I think not just my videos, but I think this topic in general, because it really anchors them, especially when that cognitive dissonance, that fog kind of settles in again. So yeah, it's the affirmation videos and the series that I'm doing on complex post-traumatic stress disorders, as far as like, relaxation and that kind of stuff, that is, I think, going to be much more soothing and relaxing than listening to this all night long. Let's see. Let me find this question that I promised I would answer. Okay. So, Venus Love is her screen name on my support group that's on my website. And she says, "Hi, Dana. I am rereading the book. It's the book club book of the month for June is Psychopath Free. And if you guys haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. It's like fantastic. I mean, nothing short of fantastic. It is just, he just nails it. We talked a little bit about it last week, and really just a fantastic book. It just, I mean, like he just nails it. He just nails it. And anyways, so her question is, she wants to know, what in the hell happened to us emotionally? How did the narcissist mentally get into our head and manufacture these emotions in us? They somehow get us from confused to upset to sad to angry to obsessive to jealous, and it's all ongoing. We might have been the most easygoing person, confident, a person of good nature and spiritual, and then we become an emotional, crazy mess. So, yes, they do. And the book Psychopath Free, Jackson Mackenzie is the guy that wrote it. He talks a lot about this and how he recommends looking, like distancing yourself and realizing, okay, were you acting like this before you were in this relationship with this person? Have you acted like this in the past with people? If not, because probably not, then the common denominator here is not you, it's them. And that can be really helpful if people are trying to sort out, is it me or is it them? Was this the best relationship ever, or was it a total nightmare? Did I lose my soulmate, or was this Satan? Like, when you're trying to figure out like what happened and what's going on, he really recommends using a concept that he calls a constant. And so your constant is somebody that you feel really comfortable around. So, a good friend, let's say, for example, or for me, my constant is my brother. So I often think if I encounter strange behavior from a guy, I think to myself, what would my brother do in this situation? How would he handle it? And that gives me a good baseline of knowing like whether or not something's weird or not. Because I think my brother is a really like he's a good guy. So it's that's kind of just that's my baseline for what's normal behavior. Because it can get so concerned and twisted around. Hold on, let me see. It can get so twisted around that people don't know like what which end is up. So how do they do this? It goes from that love bombing, right, which is like this intense like hyper validation of this constant communication, constant compliments. It's this manufactured soulmate connection where we are their perfect partner and they're so in love with us and we can do no wrong and we're elevated to this high status, right? Where it feels so amazing. I mean, it just feels like the sun is shining because there's so much attention, there's so much affection, and it feels so amazing. When things start to turn, when that devalue cycle stage starts happening, then it turns to a lot of different things, right? So it can be like that subtle grinding down. It can be a lot of like subtle comments, name calling. A lot of times it's teasing or sarcasm, or it doesn't start off like it's not really obvious at first. Oftentimes it's just that slow process, right? So part of that insanity, that crazy making roller coaster, is a lot has to do with triangulation. And so they're continually triangulating the new person. Like if you're the current partner, they're triangulating you with their ex or with like random people that they have that they're like messaging on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever. And then of course they're spinning it to make it seem like you're the one with the issue. You're jealous, you're crazy, you're possessive, you're paranoid, you have trust issues, when really, like, no, you don't. They have squirrely behavior and they, want to continue having squirrely behavior. So the only way for them to be accountable for, or I should say to not be accountable for it, is to not take accountability for it, which meaning like they blame us, right, for their issue when it's not our issue. So they normally and I printed this out and then I left it at work, but it tends to run a very set course where they will provoke an emotion like jealousy, like anger, like insecurity, and then they deny it by making it seem like, we've got some sort of issue. We're jealous or crazy or possessive or needy or clingy or what have you. When really any human being, if that emotion's being provoked, right, would have that reaction. So they're provoking an emotion, then they're denying it, then they're spinning it around, right, and then they're blaming us. And so that is the crazy making thing. And so when that happens, when now they're blaming us, so if we were originally telling them that they were being manipulative or that we didn't like their behavior, that we thought that they were cheating or acting squirrely, if they, they're acting squirrely, right? They might be triangulating, then they spin it around, they deny, and then they blame. For us, it's going to be very confusing because it's like, well, wait a minute, like who has the problem, right? So it's that level of, confusion of, wait a minute, how are we now talking about me? I want to talk about this behavior. Like, why are you messaging this other woman or this other man, or why are you trying to pick a fight, right? They deny it, they spin, they blame, they deny. So now all of a sudden it's spun back around on us, and that's confusing because it's like, wait a minute, how did we get here? Then that confusion grows to introspection, where you start wondering, is it, who has the issue here? Like, is it me or is it them? Like, am I being paranoid and needy and clingy and all these things, or what's going on? Then so then, because of all of this like confusion, and they're not denying things, they're blaming us. I mean, that's gaslighting, right? So there's all of this gaslighting going on, and if we buy into it, and oftentimes it's easy to do, because especially if you think you're in a relationship with another normal human being who wants, who, if we're having a fight, that we're going to work towards a solution, right? Like, that's, most people fight with the intention of, we're going to eventually make up. Like, there's going to be a solution. But with a narcissist or other type of emotional manipulator, there is no solution reached. There's only us apologizing for bringing up issues we had, or them getting upset and leaving, or them getting upset and doing silent treatment. So when all of that happens, there's also a big part of this identity erosion, as well as a reality erosion, where now you're starting to wonder, wait a minute, what's real? Like, did I really misconstrue that whole situation? Like, I thought I saw text messages from another woman, but now I look and I don't see them. And, like, you just start wondering what is real. And that's what really, really, really messes with the person. That's the emotional and verbal and psychological abuse. Like, that's what that looks like. So, okay. I'm going to be posting my notes on narcissist on Psychopath Free on my website, probably within the next like 3 days. And if you guys aren't familiar with the book club, what I normally do is two postings. So I post my kind of unabridged notes. Like, this is just kind of my capture, is what I call it. Like, it's a brain dump of everything that I got out of the book. And they're long. It's generally about 12 pages worth of notes. Then I go back through and take out 5 to 7 big takeaways from the book. And then I post those in like a blog post or something like that. So if you go to my website and you look up book club, then you can see my different notes. If you don't want to read the book, or you don't have time to read the book, or if you're just curious to see kind of what my takeaways were compared to what your takeaways were. And then we also have the discussion in that support group as well. And of course, that discussion, that can be moved to the other support group. It's whatever. Like, whatever you guys want to do is fine. Let's see. Chat is going quickly. JJ asks, hi Dana, you mentioned discovering that many of your friends were narcissistic. Can you talk about that a little? What kind of red flags did you see in your friends? Thanks. Sure, hold on just a second. Let me get a sip. Well, I would say the most problematic friend I had was in middle school and high school. And it runs the same pattern. So it was that, a lot of attention right away. She was so friendly and nice, and like, we were just instant friends. And I had just moved to town. We had just moved to that state, and I didn't know anybody. We moved there like maybe a week before school started. And, it was just, again, like this whirlwind kind of thing, right? So she sat down and had lunch with me, and she was just really chatty and really just took this, huge interest in me. And here I was, like, of course, this is all hindsight being what it is, right? So my parents were recently divorced. I knew nobody. I was incredibly lonely. I was incredibly vulnerable. I was in a strange state at a strange school, didn't know anybody. And it was like any other narcissistically abusive relationship. The good times were really good. We had so much fun together, and we spent all of our time together. I mean, all of our time together. When we were older, we ended up living, actually, her sister was my very first roommate. I was 18, And then I moved in with my friend when I was like 21, maybe. So, but she was just, I mean, God, I used to even describe that relationship to people. I would say I felt like I was in an abusive relationship. And I would laugh it off because in my mind, I was thinking, but we're not dating, right? Like, and she's not hitting me. And so it's not an abusive relationship. But now, knowing what I know now, oh, yes, it was. She was incredibly controlling, incredibly possessive, crazy, crazy. She would do things like, I don't even know where to start. She did not get her driver's license until I think she was like 18. And so we all had to chauffeur her around. And she did not like to chip in for gas money. It was always her way. She always had to sit shotgun. If she didn't, she would throw a freaking fit, and everybody knew it. One time, her sister had a party, and the guy that she liked was at the party, and he was hitting on her sister, and she didn't like that. And so she went into the bathroom and took a whole bottle of baby aspirin for attention, right? And then comes out and announces that, and then ends up going to the ER and drinking charcoal. And it was ongoing stuff like that. Like, you just knew everything was all about her all of the time. And if anybody crossed her, if she did not get her way, there was hell to pay. I mean, silent treatment, just, like, just vindictive, bitter, crazy behavior. When we lived together, when we were in our early 20s, she would do things. She just was very controlling. She was very controlling and very possessive. I remember this one night. So, okay, like, our house was here, right? Okay, let me see if you can see this in my camera. Okay, and the house was here. My work was here, and then the library was over here. So it was like doon, doon, doon. I had left work, went to the library, circled around, and came home. So I pulled into the driveway coming in from a different direction. And she'd asked me she was sitting on the couch in the dark smoking. Like, crazy, like single white female kind of crazy stuff. And had asked me where I had been. And I had said, oh, I just got home from work. Like, which was the truth, because I dropped some books off at the library, but like, it wasn't, like that. I didn't think that was significant. And she got really irritated and was like, no, you didn't, because you pulled in from a different angle. Stuff like that. And it was just always having to answer to her, always, it was never okay. Not that I would ever do this anyhow, but it was never okay for me to like a guy that she liked, or especially date a guy that she liked, but it was okay for her to do that. She would go after guys I had dated, or, things like that. She was just very unpredictable. She was just spoiled, flipping rotten. I have never, and my mom even made a comment one time. She said, and she was right. She's like, those girls they're rotten. Like, they're just rotten children. And they really were. The way that they talked to their parents, they got away with everything. And a lot of it with her, especially, she was really, really spoiled. Her sister was a brat too, but nothing like my friend. My friend was, knowing what I know now, like, hands down personality disorder kind of stuff going on. Like, not even, like, not in my mind, not even debatable. Like, it was just so extreme and so attention seeking and so controlling and exhausting. And after that friendship ended, I ended that. And I had a really hard time ending it, because it was like an abusive relationship. Again, like, the good times were really good. We were really, like, inseparable for like 6 years. When I finally ended things, I was just devastated. And she picked up and moved out and got a new best friend within like a week, and I never heard from her again. Like, and it was like I never existed. It was like our friendship never mattered. And I felt like I was going through a divorce, because basically all of our friends had to pick sides, and most of them ended up going to her side, because they knew if they didn't, that there would be hell to pay. And so I lost a lot of friends in that whole mix as well. It was really, really rough for like a couple years after that. It was really rough because I lost a big chunk of my support system. And yeah, it was tough. It was really tough. Before her, I met her when I was 15. It was right around that time. No, it was about a year after that. I began dating a guy who was a total psycho. Actually, that was his nickname, was Psycho. Like, don't ever date people or befriend people with the nickname Psycho. Like, that's just a good rule of thumb. And it was, again, the same, just the same, the exact same kind of stuff. That was really scary things. I mean, I've had a lot of problematic people in my life. I didn't connect the dots and see the pattern until like this year. I just thought it was a fluke thing. I minimized it. I didn't see the commonalities between them. And I think a lot of it had to do with, I dated this crazy guy when I was in high school. I thought that was a total fluke. I didn't date anybody even close. I've never dated anybody close to him ever since, even though the other two guys I was tangled up with were crazy in their own right and problematic in their own right. They were nothing like this other guy. And, so it's just, now I totally see it, but I didn't see it before. So let's see. Shakira asks, Dana, what is your website? It's thriveafterabuse.com. And let's see. People are talking about what causes a narcissist to be a narcissist. Is there a genetic predisposition? Well, the reality is people, they don't really know. So there's theories on it, but that's, psychology, all of that's a soft science. It's not really, like, you can do studies, but there's so many different variables within people that it's really hard to isolate different variables. I mean, you can do like twin studies and try to isolate things more, but and I think it depends on who you ask. I think a lot of people, the common theories of narcissism are that you either have a child who has, kind of nature versus nurture. So you either have a child that was born in an environment of trauma or that was incredibly spoiled. Or the whole kind of nature component, which is that some people just have this bend in their personality. I mean, the people that I have encountered in my life that have been highly problematic haven't, I mean, and, I don't know, everybody's probably got their secrets, but as far as I know, like, they didn't undergo any like massive trauma. Like this girl that I was talking to you about, like it was kind of normal, normal stuff that she went through in her life. I mean, she wasn't bullied. Her parents were still married. Her dad was like this awesome dad. I just thought the world of him. Her mother was mentally ill, but she wasn't, when she was stable and she was fine. And she was stable, a good chunk of the time, like at least 90% of the time. So, there was nothing that you could point to and be like, yep, that's why they're that way. So, and then there's kind of this theory too that like, so you have like narcissists that just have kind of this stunted ego development, right? And that's why they are the way they are. It's an interesting theory. Whether or not it's true or not, I'm sure it is to some degree, right? Like some percentage of the time that is true, but who's to say? Then there's kind of the theory that sociopaths are more created, that they're created through trauma. Then the theory of psychopaths is that they're more born, like they're just born that way. And again, I think people are complicated and there's just a lot of different factors at play. I've talked to some parents. I used to work with problematic kids, with quote unquote at-risk kids, which really oftentimes mean like abused kids is what that really tends to be. But sometimes And I've seen kids that were really problematic at a young age, and their parents had, two or three other children that were fine. And it was just this one child, and there was really kind of no explanation for it. So, you know, I don't know. People are interesting, and the human brain is absolutely fascinating. Okay, let me scroll up and see. It's a really valid point. Cecilia says, never underestimate denial. A lot of people don't talk about or recognize things they go through until much later. Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I have no idea because I wasn't there, right? Like, I have no idea what they went through in their childhood. Um, I have a friend of mine who her sister was recently diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And I would agree that her sister probably has a lot of that, but I think there's also a really heavy narcissism component to that because, well, just because of how she acts. And we were talking about it, and she was saying, you know, she didn't understand how her sister could have a personality disorder. They grew up, their parents are married, they grew up under the same roof. She's like, nothing really happened to her, like outside of, kind of normal, growing up kind of stuff. She was always, I mean, it just, so, I don't know. Badger Botherer says, I see most people referring to narcissists as he and comments saying most are male. I'm wondering if that's correct. So there's a couple things with that. Statistically speaking, and of course, like statistics can be skewed, but statistically speaking, the vast majority of reported narcissists, people that have like narcissistic personality disorder, are male. However, there's a couple things here. So for starters, in order for that to even be like documented and tracked, a person has to be officially diagnosed. For a person to be officially diagnosed, it's generally done in like maybe like one of three ways. Either they go to therapy, they're going to a psychiatrist, or they're in jail and they're doing a diagnosis there. Most men don't bring, if they have a girlfriend or a wife who has problematic behavior, they are going to be, men just kind of, it's like this weird social stigma. A lot of them don't go to therapy. And even if they did go to therapy, a lot of women, I think, are more diagnosed as borderline personality disorder instead of narcissist or antisocial, which is the newer term for sociopath or psychopath. So there's a lot of different ways that I think this statistic is being misreported and being underreported. And then, of course, too, men tend to do jail time more often than women. So again, like the stats, I think, are very, very skewed. So from what I see on my site, it's closer, I would say, like a 60-40. Like my site is probably about 60% women, 40% men-ish. And my guess, the reason that it's not, and maybe a little bit lower, maybe like 38, 62. I think the reason it's not closer to 50-50 is that my guess is that a lot of men don't, they're not I think it takes men a while to connect in their mind what is really going on. Again, like due to a lot of the social stigma, because even though there's a lot of information out there about what abuse is, even for women, it takes an awful lot for them to realize, hey, this is a really problematic relationship. This is an abusive relationship. So because the information that's out there doesn't often show the flip side of that. They don't show like what an abusive relationship looks like with a man being a target of abuse. it's not a conversation that's being openly and readily had. It needs to be. That's part of my goal with this channel and doing this outreach, is to open up the conversation about it, because abuse can happen to anybody, right? And it does happen to a lot of people of all genders, sexual orientations, religions, nationalities, ages, you name it. So, I think when you're seeing, again, in the comments and things like that, a lot of the gender bias, people talking about them in terms of them being mostly male, it just happens to be with kind of who's on the chat at that time. People tend to talk about their experience from their personal experience. Kind of like with my earlier videos in the Red Flags of the Narcissist series, I only talk about my experience with narcissists and other problematic people from my point of view, which is my personal experience generally has been with men. Again, like I had this one friend in high school. Like I said, I didn't even connect that she was kind of within that cluster B. I hadn't even thought about that situation in a long, long time. So I didn't connect that until, this year. So I was only talking about my experience having to do with men, and then my professional experience from when I was working at a domestic violence shelter. And the vast majority of domestic violence shelters, it's women that are women and children that are staying there, and generally the abusers are male. So all of my training, all of my education, all of my experience had been, female victim, male abuser, and that's problematic, like in a couple different ways. And it's, like it's only a part of the puzzle. Like there's a lot more to it. And to not open up that discussion and talk about, all of the different facets of abuse and who can be a victim and who can be an abuser, is doing everybody a huge disservice. So, okay, let me get another drink here. Lewis asks, was there a lot of difference between Dana's first narcissist compared to her second? No, not really. In fact, the second guy, his name was Steve, and the first guy, his name was Jack. I kept telling Steve, like, it's really uncanny, like the similarities between you and Jack. I mean, because there were so many undeniable similarities. They were both Prince Charming. They were both coming to my rescue. They were both, I had this intense soulmate connection. They were so amazing to me. And, I ended up buying both of them a truck. There was just a lot of similarities there. I really thought I would probably, I was going to marry both of them. It was this whirlwind situation with both of them. We moved very, very quickly. Lots and lots of similarities there. They were both, and they were both living a double life. I mean, Jack was, come to find out at the tail end of it, he'd been living a double life since, not probably, like for sure since day one, but, that's what he did. And I think Jack's intention was, he thought I was going to get a bunch of money from my divorce, and I didn't. I pretty much walked away from everything. We settled on a lot of stuff. It was a very amicable, divorce. And I don't think he believed me, because my ex-husband and I owned a handful of rental properties together. And I think Jack thought, I didn't find this out until later, but he thought that we owned these houses free and clear. He was from Europe, and I guess in Europe they don't do mortgages like they do over here, or I don't know. But he thought that there really was no money in these houses. I mean, the real estate market had tanked. I was upside down in two of these houses. One of them went into foreclosure. Like, there was nothing there. And I think he was, we had been planning on starting a business together, and I would be financing it with my credit and everything. And I think he just thought I was going to be his meal ticket, his cash cow. And, like, then I happened to stumble across everything, and it was, I mean, it was so, like, undeniable and so ridiculous and, like, crazy what he was up to. And I also think I'd mentioned this before in other videos. I have a feeling that he was potentially trying to poison me, So, because I hadn't been feeling good, like the last 6 months or so that I was living there. And I kept thinking, like, is it carbon monoxide, or is it, is it altitude sickness? Is it guilt? Is it depression? Like, was it a propane leak? Like, why do I feel the way that I feel? And, but then I was like, well, no, the dogs are fine. Like, Jack is fine. Why do I just feel this way? And it wasn't until I actually moved here again, this was probably like about a year ago. I was going through an old memory trunk of mine, and I came across a drawing that he had done of me reading a book by candlelight. And then up in the top of the picture, there's a picture of a snake that had swallowed a person. And for me, it just really reconfirmed that, yeah, he was for sure up to something, and that I wasn't crazy for thinking that he had been poisoning me or drugging me, and that would have been my fate. Steve also he was married. He was living this double life. He told me that, you know, his marriage was over. I had told him he needed to, if that was true, he needed to up and move out and file papers, because I wasn't going to date a married man. And he did. He did that within a few days. And then it turned out they were still talking the whole time. And then it turned out this wasn't the first time he'd upped and left her. This was like the third. And it was just all of this. I mean, he moved cross country with me. And we were planning on getting married. I mean, it's just this whole wild whirlwind craziness. And then I, again, like, it just on and on and on, like, just nonsense and lies galore. So they were both very covert. And if you were to meet either one of them, as Steve especially, he was so charming and witty and funny and intelligent, and everybody loved him. Like, everybody loved him. My parents loved him. My friends loved him. Total strangers loved him. Like, he just was one of those, like, really likable kind of guys. Jack was really likable too, but I think he kind of creeped a lot of people out. Like, my mom did not like him at first. Over time she did, but not at first. He was the kind of guy, we lived up in the mountains. He would plow people's driveways during the winter. He was just like, Mr. Reliable. I mean, he was a really, really seemingly great guy. And I had a really hard time understanding how, like, those two sides of him, like how he could be so great and so charming and likable and witty. We could have so much in common. He could be my soulmate. And then how could he be, like, cheating on me with, like, dozens, if not hundreds of people, and potentially poisoning me? And like, it did not make sense, because it was like two different people sharing the same body. I mean, it was really, really hard for me to wrap my mind around that. And keep in mind too, at the time I was working at a domestic, like, here's the kicker in all of this. I was working at a domestic violence center. Okay. I was teaching part of what I was doing was teaching classes on red flags of problematic behavior. So I was teaching, but I realized after Jack, because I was making myself nuts, I'm like, what was I missing? What was I not seeing? Because I felt like if anybody should have seen these signs, it should have been me, because I had a ton of education in this, and, I worked in this. And then I realized I was only teaching, and I'd really only been taught, like, the more obvious signs of kind of overt abusive people. Is this, male or female? How are they to a waitress? How are they to a hotel maid? How are they to animals or to children? And, do they have issues with power and control? And are they a misogynist? And, those kinds of things. Jack and Steve were none of those. Like, they were the exact opposite. They were the kind of guy that most people would be like, I really, they would want their daughter to date that kind of a guy. Like they came across, I mean, total wolves in sheep's clothing. Like they really presented well. So that really took a while for me to wrap my mind around. And it wasn't until I got into a support group years later, that everything began to really make sense, because it didn't for the longest time. So Jasmine says that Red Flag series is a godsend. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I think it helps people to hear the stories of other people. I think that's another one of the benefit of support groups is because we're all basically telling different versions of the same story. And there's a lot of validation that can come from, because it's such an isolating feeling thinking, I mean, I remember with Jack, just thinking like, am I nuts? Like, am I nuts for thinking that this guy could have poisoned me? Is my mind going to this place because I am heartbroken and I'm like grief struck, or is it a bad breakup, or was this really possibly going on? And like, I felt like I was losing my mind. So, and then the more, actually, it was interesting too, when I got into the support group, and then again, like you start hearing other people's experiences and then you start reflecting on your own. And then it's just these waves of realizations that wash over you where you start realizing, oh, okay, I bet that was a lie too. And that you just start seeing things differently. So all of the nonsense and lies I had found out about, that was only the tip of the iceberg. Like he had lied about everything. And thankfully I chatted up his ex-wife on Facebook. I ended up talking to her over the phone. She was fantastic and had told me they were married for like 3 months. She found out, again, like he was living a double life. He was after her for her money. He upped and quit his job pretty much right after they got married. She said she realized she'd made a huge mistake, that this guy was not who she thought he was. And she told me, she said, if I were you, I would just run, don't look back. Like, this guy is just bad news. He's trouble. She's like, I have no idea who he really is. He just kind of apparently like goes from town to town, and he's a compulsive liar and, lots of problematic behavior. But there wasn't, in those relationships, there was some gaslighting, but it wasn't to the extent, it didn't register as like the mind scramble that a lot of gaslighting registers. It didn't like erode my sanity. It was just sort of like, it was just lies. It was things that didn't make sense. And I think what messed with me more was after those relationships were over, and then, you begin kind of like untangling everything and examining it, and then really trying to figure out what exactly happened, what was the truth. For me with Jack, what messed with my head for the longest time was thinking that I was sharing a bed with somebody who was potentially trying to kill me. And that was terrifying, because I really thought that he was one of my best friends. Like, we just did everything together. So the fact that not only did he not love me, like he didn't even like me, and he was most likely planning on killing me, was really, really hard for me to wrap my mind around. The one guy that I was talking about in high school that I said I would never, like, I vowed to myself, I'm like, I am never dating anybody like this guy again. He had all of the more like overt signs of problematic behavior. He was the guy that was a jerk to the waitress. He was he was inconsiderate. He was rude. He called me names. There was a lot of gaslighting. I would say, this is what I saw. And he would say that never happened. And I didn't know what to believe. And he ended up, I didn't realize that it was stalking at the time, but he was stalking me for years after that. And then I felt stupid that I didn't realize that I was being stalked. because in my mind, again, like, and I think everybody has this, where we have this perception of what something is or what it looks like, and if our reality doesn't match our idea of our definition of something, then it doesn't compute. So for me, I had thought of stalking as, like in the movies, like you're like actively being stalked, and this person's continually, consistently after you. And that was not my experience. He would surface, every now and again. And I had my phone number. This is back before cell phones. I had my phone number, my home phone number, of course, unlisted. He would somehow find it. He'd call, getting hang up calls, harassing calls. I had roommates at the time. He'd show up at friends' houses wanting to see me. But then there were periods where I would hear nothing from him for months. And yeah, so it was terrifying to me, but nobody else. That was the crazy making thing with that was everybody thought that I was just being drama. Like they didn't take, like they would say, oh, well, you just tell him to leave you alone. Or, it just, like I would get blamed for him if he'd show up at my work or what. And I, like, mind you, like was not talking to this guy at all. Nothing. And I didn't know. I didn't realize that was, I knew that there was something wrong. I knew I was terrified of him. I had that feeling that he could easily kill somebody. He could kill me and he wouldn't care. Again, his nickname was Psycho. Like he was psycho. And it wasn't until I began working at the domestic violence shelter, almost 15 years later, that I realized what I was watching watching a training film, and there was all these different scenes with kind of after the fact, after people had been stalked or whatever. And again, and now that I'm saying it out loud, it was seeing other people's stories and seeing my own stuff reflected back at me, being like, that's what I went through. Like, that's what I went through. And just breaking down crying. And I hadn't thought about this guy. I hadn't cried about it. I hadn't anything in 15 years. And it just all came flooding back. And it was just so validating, realizing the way that I felt, that fear, that terror, that paranoia, it wasn't me being drama. Like that was very, very real. Like these are the signs. This is how this happens. When people are unstable, when they attack, when they go to kill their significant other or a former partner, it's that kind of stuff. It doesn't go down generally like how we see on the news or especially like on TV or in the movies. What we're seeing even on the news is, like the final moment. But there's a lot of stuff that leads up to that. And oftentimes it's seemingly it's easy to gloss over. It can be like a rose on the windshield. It can be a text message saying I love you. It can be stuff like that, but people don't associate that with abuse because it's a rose on a windshield and a text saying I love you, right? It's not a threat, but it's that implied threat. It's that reminder of I'm watching you. I know where you are. I'm thinking about you. And that's what really terrifies somebody that is being stalked. And it's crazy making because friends and family, oftentimes even police, even therapists sometimes don't identify that as abuse, and they gloss over it, which is very re-victimizing and invalidating for a person who's going through that because everybody's just making light of their situation and they are absolutely terrified and they don't know where to go for help. So that is a kind of a long-winded story. Namal, hello Namal, says, I don't know if anyone has seen Gone Girl, but that film pretty much nails covert narcissists, at least female. I haven't. I have heard it's a disturbing film, and I am a big chicken when it comes to disturbing films, but let me make a note of it. I did not realize that it covered that. So now I will see it because I no, it's my area of interest. A great movie on that shows a covert narcissist, in my opinion, is the movie How Stella Got Her Groove Back. And I talk about this movie a lot. It's one of my it was one of my favorite movies like 15 years ago because it was a great love story. It's one of my favorite movies now because it really shows all of the problematic behavior of a covert narcissist. It shows Stella. It shows her cognitive dissonance kicking in. It shows all of the confusion, all of the introspection, all of the justification, all of it. And if you heard kind of what happened, fast forward 7 or so years after that movie was made, because it's a true story. Winston, the guy in the movie, sweet, sweet Winston, he ended up actually being gay and then suing Stella. And Terry McMillan is the author. It's her story, suing her, trying to get alimony and all kinds of money out of her. Fantastic movie. How Stella Got Her Groove Back. It's an old movie. But if you didn't know about covert narcissists, if you didn't know how emotional manipulators worked, you wouldn't see the movie in that light. You would think, oh, this is an amazing whirlwind love story. But healthy people don't move at whirlwind pace. And another interesting element in that movie is Stella, Terry, her former husband is an overt narcissist, and he's a total jerk and he's a total pig in the movie. And again, like that is so how this tends to go. So if a person's already been through a verbally or emotionally abusive relationship with more of that overt narcissist, then they're really, really primed for a covert narcissist. Because they're trying, would make sense, right? Because they're trying to do the exact opposite. So they know in their mind, okay, I need to avoid a person that, that's mean to the waitress and that, is mean to children and animals and he's controlling and or she's controlling and possessive. Like these are all of the more obvious major warning signs. So in order to avoid dating somebody like that again, they do the exact opposite. So when they come across a covert narcissist who is love bombing them and who's good to the waitress and good to their children and good to their dog and is Prince or Princess Charming, they fall for it hook, line, and sinker, not realizing that those are also signs of abusive behavior. So, XCM says, is it not how the film was marketed as a whirlwind love affair? Yes, it was. Yes, and that movie was marketed as kind of love against all odds, because she had gone through this really awful divorce with this jerk face ex-husband, and she was in a funk, right? And she sees a commercial for Jamaica and decides, I'm gonna go to Jamaica. I'm going to do something to treat myself. So her and her best friend go to Jamaica. I think her best friend goes the second time with her. She goes to Jamaica. She meets Winston, who's half her age. Okay. So red flag number one, right? That's something's off right there. Not saying that an age difference like that is always problematic, but it's not normal. So it's something to slow down and kind of be like, well, this is interesting, right? So here she is, this wealthy American coming to Jamaica, and she's obviously single. She's fresh out of a divorce. She's incredibly vulnerable. She doesn't realize it. Winston, right away is just, oh, Stella, you're so beautiful and you're so amazing. And he's so supportive and he's just everything that she needs. And she leaves Jamaica. They're still talking and stuff. He comes out to visit her. And then, and again, like it's so great to see the movie because you can see exactly how this happens. He comes to visit her. She lives in this, gorgeous neighborhood. She's got money. And he's looking around like, wow, I didn't even know places like this existed. And then shortly after that, he moves in with her. And They're having some issues because he's acting like a kid, because he is a kid and he's like 20. And but the whole time he's being incredibly supportive of, she was making furniture, I think, and he's being supportive of that. He's being supportive of her. He's being incredibly romantic. They did an interview on Oprah, Terry McMillan, and I don't know what his real name is. I just know him as Sweet, Sweet Winston. But they did an interview on Oprah, and it was, and I don't know if he became, I don't know. The interview on Oprah, he's incredibly effeminate. And, whether he became more effeminate after he came out of the closet, I don't know. Or if he was always like that, I don't know. But she had even said, well, because he was saying like, oh, we're still really good friends. And, oh, Terry, don't be like that. And I did love you and I wasn't using you. And she's so angry that she can barely even talk. And she had made a comment that, she would be measuring all men by the standard that he set, because he had been so good to her. And I think it was right around that time that like it clicked for me. Because when she said that, because I think most of us, if you're with a covert narcissist who's Prince Charming or Princess Charming up until you find out about their double life and the nonsense and the lies and the stealing and the blah, 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 that's how we feel. We feel like they are the most amazing thing to ever happen to us, because it's too good to be true is why. So for her to say that, to me, it was like, yeah, he was a con artist. That's what they do. Let's see. Let me scroll up. Jasmine says, yep, Prince Harming. Yeah. Vinny says, now I know I wasn't even loved, let alone liked. Ryan asks, oh, hi, Ryan. How do you let go of knowing that they're going to go on and abuse someone else? It's really hard. That was one of the hardest things for me to move past. I mean, you just live with it. You just live with it every single day, and you pray that their behavior is not going to drive the next person to suicide. Because you guys know, I know, it just takes you to such an emotionally low place that, and especially once kind of the flying monkeys come in, right, where they've manipulated other people, friends and family, who are now coming around and attacking you, it can easily push a person over the edge. And it's one of those things like, for me personally, I was very fortunate in that I was able to contact Jack's ex-wife. And, they'd been divorced for a long time, so there was no like feelings for her at all anymore. And she was able to just give me the validation that I needed. Had I not talked to her, I probably would have gotten hung up on thinking that the relationship could be fixed, because there was so much about it that was so right. And at first I really thought that he, quote unquote, just had a sex addiction. And then what did it for me with that was he was using my pet name for him as his screen name on Plenty of Fish. And it was like seeing that level, like that lack of remorse, that lack of regard, made it very clear like he did not care at all. But I was very fortunate in that I got the validation I needed from her. And then with Steve's wife, it was the same thing. So he, of course, had been triangulating us the whole time, saying that I was, this homewrecker and had done all this stuff, when that was not the truth. It was the exact opposite, in fact. And he was pitting her against me. She'd become a flying monkey and was viciously attacking me over the phone and over email. And we got to talking. And then once we realized what was going on, that we'd both been lied to and triangulated, then we were on the same page. And I think she probably did too to some level, but she's still lost in that fog of denial and cognitive dissonance. I was able to get the clarity that I needed to fully walk away from that. So if I were, but back to your question, if I were to experience another problematic person like this, or if I was back in that situation, I guess part of me, I would try to warn the next person, but knowing that they're probably not going to believe you, because to the next person, they're getting love bombed, right? So they're thinking what we were thinking. They're thinking that they've met their soulmate, that it's this amazing magical connection they can't deny. And, that us trying to warn them is just proof that we really are this crazy, bitter ex that they've been told about, right? Because that's what emotional manipulators do. So any warning that we try to give just validates that we're bitter and crazy and jaded. If you were to go about trying to approach somebody, I guess first and foremost, I would not do this if the person is dangerous, or if you feel like you'd be putting your safety at risk at all. So that's, always kind of the baseline there. If you were to try to warn somebody, or if I were to try to warn somebody, I would do it in a way that I would let them know. I would say, you know what, you don't know me, and I dated Jack a long time ago. I don't expect you to believe what I'm going to say, because I don't think I would have believed it had somebody said this to me. This is what I experienced with him. I just want you to know that if you start seeing this kind of behavior, if he starts accusing you of things, if he starts doing, strange things, like that, this is most likely what's going on. And I'm telling you this because I doubted my sanity and my safety and a lot of things for a long time, and it could have cost me my life. So I would frame it in that way, where you're just saying, like, if they spin things around, if they deny it, if they blame you, there's a term for that. It's called gaslighting. Or, look up, I would just encourage, like, this is what some of their behavior is. You're not crazy if you experience this. I just want you to know that, like, woman to woman or man to man or whatever. Human being to human being. I just want you to know that. But again, they're probably not going to believe you. And you definitely don't want, outing a narcissist at all, or calling their game, like divorcing them, breaking up with them. It's a lot like kicking a bee's nest. They don't do well when they lose power and control. And so whatever you go into, where you're going to out them, right? Or you're going to somehow make them lose power and control, you better have a plan in place. Because it's a lot like kicking a bee's nest. Like, you don't want to kick it and then think, well, now where am I going to go? Like, you need to know that before you do it, because it can get very dangerous very quickly. So, okay. Again, it's one of those things, like, once you're aware of what problematic behavior is. Hold on a second, I'm trying to stop the chat. Once you're aware of what problematic behavior is, it is like the biggest aha moment. I mean, you're going to find, my guess is that, I don't think I'm alone in this. Like, once you're aware, truly, truly aware of all the different types of problematic behavior and how it surfaces, you are able to spot it a lot faster. It does take practice. And if you have unresolved vulnerabilities, right? If you still are carrying around some empty buckets, right? Like, if you're lonely, or if you're feeling, for me, I was feeling very unloved and very unimportant pretty much my whole life. And so those were my vulnerabilities. That's how I kept getting tangled up with these people. And of course, it's kind of a crapshoot, right? But I had these unaddressed vulnerabilities. I didn't know it. So sometimes I would get tangled up with an emotional manipulator, but sometimes I wouldn't. And so I didn't see, there was no consistency in that pattern there. It wasn't until I dated Jack and Steve within like a 5-year period of time where they both were like a lifetime TV movie, where I had to take a step back and be like, what is going on here? Like, what am I missing? And, you know, in doing a ton of soul searching and getting involved in support groups and reading everything I could about this and, trying to figure out why wasn't my life working? Like, what kind of subconscious patterns was I running in? And, now that I get it, now that I really see what problematic behavior was, because I think, again, like a lot of people have this idea that problematic behavior is like really problematic behavior, and it oftentimes it isn't. It's a subtle grinding down of a person. It's silent treatment. It's subtle name calling disguised as a joke. It's little things here and there, like forgetting somebody's birthday or sending them a present a few days late, like letting them know like you're not important to me. Provoking fights, making comments with emotional manipulators. And this is what makes a lot of what they say so powerful and so painful, is there always tends to be like a little kernel of truth to it, but it's wrapped in a big ball of a lie. So, for me, for a long time, like if somebody, if they had made a comment about my weight or, whatever, it was sort of like, well, okay, there's like truth to that. So I guess I can't really be that upset about it because there's truth to that. But yeah, you can be upset about it because like there's no need to be hurtful to other people, right? So things like that. But a lot of a lot of targets of abusive behavior, they feel like they don't that they are being too sensitive because there is some sort of kernel of truth to that. So yeah, Doug says, after my abuse, I was not sure what was true and what wasn't inside my own head. It took me years to figure it out. Sandra says, my greatest regret was not listening to my instincts. 2 years later, I learned that they were spot on. So one of the biggest reasons as to why we don't listen to our instincts has to do with our vulnerabilities, or what I call our empty buckets, and cognitive dissonance. Those two things go hand in hand all the time. Okay. And cognitive dissonance can also happen at other times, but it always happens when there's a vulnerability there. So for example, okay, let me think. Okay. So like with Jack, when I first met him, there were some red flags there, like, because there always are, right? I just had that funny feeling about him early on. Same with Steve. And I glossed over it because there's this saying out there that hungry hearts eat lies. And emotional manipulators are relying on that. So it's kind of like when people get caught up in a cult or in any type of scam, especially like an online dating scam, where, and I get emails like this all the time. People are like, Dana, how did this happen to me? I am a doctor. I'm an attorney. I'm a police officer. I'm, insert whatever profession that they feel like they should know better. And how did I get here? How did I should know? Again, like I was working in a domestic violence shelter. How did I not see these signs? How did I not know? And it's because our logical brain and our emotional brain are like, there's two different parts of our brain. And if we need some emotional needs met, if we are starved out for attention or affection, or, and they're showering us, right, with attention and affection. Again, I think the easiest way to see this is with online dating scams. These people are preying on vulnerable people oftentimes, right? And then they start extorting money from them. Deep down, they know that something's wrong, but it's like they're in denial about it because they want this relationship so badly to work. And And there's so much to it that's just, it's heartbreaking, because the more money they give, the more they realize something's wrong, but the more they feel like, I can't, I don't want to walk away now, because what if there's this 1% chance that this person could really be my future partner, and I don't want to offend them, and I don't want them to think I don't care, so I'm going to continue giving them money. And of course, friends and family are saying, what are you doing? You're nuts. This is a scam, or this person's not legit. And so because they don't want to give that up, they quit talking to friends and family about it. And so then it becomes this very isolating, very secretive, clandestine type activity that they're doing, and that's what happens with abuse, in any form, right? So there's this heavy component of isolation. So whether the abuser isolates the victim by taking them, moving them out into the country or to another city or to another state or what have you, or there's financial isolation, or there's this social isolation, which oftentimes is self-imposed by the target, because the target knows, I want to be with this person. Like, I'm really hoping that they're legitimate. Or in the case of an actual, person to person abusive relationship, they're thinking to themselves, I don't want to leave, right? Because of course, again, like, the good times are really good, the bad times are really bad. That right there, that is a hallmark, trademark. One of the top warning signs that you are in an abusive relationship, because normal relationships don't run that way. The good times are not fairy tale good. The bad times are not Lifetime TV movie bad. So kind of let that be said. But what was I saying? Oh, so if a person's in a relationship and friends and family are saying, hey, this seems a little off, or I'm not okay with that. I don't like the way that this person talks to you or treats you, or, I've been hearing some things about this person. If we want to stay in that relationship, we're going to justify their bad behavior. And then odds are, to decrease that cognitive dissonance, which is a fancy term, $10 term for mental distress. It's mental distress that we feel when we're holding two conflicting beliefs at the same time about the same topic. So if we're believing that we want to stay married to this person, but we're also, if we get new information that says that this person is a con artist, we have to choose one. Which belief are we now going to choose? If our action and our beliefs, the second part of this is our beliefs have to match up with our behavior. If our beliefs don't match up with our behavior, that's when we really start experiencing cognitive dissonance. And so to get them to match up, we generally justify things. This is why you see people acting very irrationally, when they're in a cult, when they're dealing with an online dating scammer, when they're in an abusive relationship, because they're not in reality. They're in this fog of cognitive dissonance. So they're in fantasy land of what they really want this relationship to be. And of course, it's hard too when you're in a relationship, however it's abusive, right? If it's emotional, verbal, financial, whatever, physical, because emotional abusers move quick and they create this whirlwind. Their targets, we get tangled up with them very, very quickly. And so, they're quick to rush marriage and to, get another person pregnant, or to get pregnant, or to combine finances. So it's very difficult to leave once they've gotten their tentacles around you. So, there's just lots and lots of elements at play there. Marie says, what is a good way to resolve the CPTSD? Okay. That's a great question. And I don't think that there is just like one answer. I think it's kind of a multi-faceted answer. Generally, time is a big factor in it. Most of the time, it tends to, depending on what a person goes through, of course, it tends to resolve within to a point where a person's able to function, and start like trusting people and leaving the house and doing that within like 12 to 24 months. Some people it's sooner, some people it's later. It just depends on what a person goes through. For myself, I had a lot of like, after hindsight being what it is, yeah, definitely had a lot of like CPTSD stuff going on. Didn't realize it at the time. Just thought I was going insane. Like, I just thought I was paranoid, and I didn't know. I felt like I was losing my mind, and I didn't know why. I felt like I was really overreacting, and it was just, I was embarrassed by my behavior. It was awful. And, you know, learning to trust other people again is a huge thing, and that takes a lot of time. I think the only way to really resolve that is to really learn to trust your judgment. Because that was the big mistake that I made. After my relationship with Jack, I really just thought, this is a fluke thing, right? I didn't see this guy. And of course, like, even my mom was saying, like, Dana, how could you have known? Like, he came across as Prince Charming. There weren't any warning signs there. How could you have known? There were signs. They just were very subtle. But it was that feeling, right? So I talk a lot about red flags are not seen, they're felt. And because we feel them, they're very easy to gloss over. So it's really easy, especially if we want to gloss over it, if we want that relationship to work. So if we're in a position like I was, right? I was fresh out of a divorce. This big bomb had gone off in my life, and I had no traction in my own life. I was completely vulnerable, didn't realize it, not thinking clearly. And, so when that ended, I really thought to myself, it was a fluke thing. And, I again, did not see a pattern there. It did not register to me that I had poor boundaries or standards, because I didn't feel like I did. I mean, there wasn't any of this back and forth stuff, makeup, breakup. It was fantastic up until I found out about his double life, and then it all like got crazy. So I didn't see what I would have done differently. And so, like, okay, so then, like, learning, dealing with the night terrors, dealing with the paranoia, dealing with wanting to isolate, dealing with trying to figure out what really happened. That took a while, and that your brain is going to ruminate on things. The more you read about narcissism and sociopathy and psychopathy, the more it'll all make sense. And so I think education is a huge part of it. And then, I mean, there's so much to it, because other people tend to not understand. Even a lot of times, even it's hard to find a good therapist who really is familiar with emotional, like, narcissistic abuse. A lot of them are not. And, that's its own level of crazy making. So lots of different levels of crazy making to kind of sort through. So anyways, I had gotten to the place finally, where I was ready to date again, where I was, feeling good. Like, I felt like I'd healed from this, not knowing, like, this was there's a couple of mistakes that I made, like, hindsight being what it is. I thought that healing from this meant stopping the pain. That was kind of my definition of healing, was, okay, well, I'm able to function in life. I'm able to be around men. I want to date. So I felt healed, because before, and I would even go around describing myself like this, I felt like a hot mess. Like, and I was a wreck. I was a total emotional wreck. Like I said, trusted no one. I was suspicious of friends and family. Talk about hypervigilant. Like, I was a freaking wreck. It was awful. I mistook that calming down, and that took about 12 months for me, for that to completely resolve itself, to where I felt I wasn't wondering who else had an agenda. After that calmed down, and then I began dating again. So with Steve, again, there were a lot of red flags there, right? Like not major ones. And this was again like the added crazy making part of it, because, I told you he was married. He was coming on fast and furious with me. And I told him, I said, I'm not dating a married man. You got to move out and file papers. I totally believed him when he had said, their marriage had been over for a long time, that he had tried leaving her before, that she was incredibly manipulative and had lied and said that she had cancer, and he moved back in to take care of her, but she really didn't have cancer. I just bought all of that hook, line, and sinker, because I actually had known Steve for several years. So, like, and everything that I'd seen with him, like he was a super stand-up guy. So I took him at face value. My spidey sense was going off like crazy, but I didn't trust my judgment. And so, and again, it was because that cognitive dissonance was setting in, right? And so I found myself really wanting to believe him, because he, like, again, like was handsome, charming, witty, the whole nine. I really wanted to believe everything that he was saying. And because I really wanted to believe it, I began doubting myself. And you know how I always say, like, confusion is always the first sign of problematic behavior. Always. When we're around healthy people or in a healthy situation, we're not confused. We have clarity. We know where we stand, right? So whenever you're feeling confused, that's a problem. It means something's off. It means that generally you're missing the truth, right? Because truth is clarity. So if the absence of clarity is confusion. So because I really wanted that relationship to work, I didn't want to see the red flags. I began wondering, well, maybe I'm paranoid. Maybe it's because of my relationship with Jack. Maybe I have issues with men or trust or commitment or, any number of these things. And so I began asking my friends, what do you guys think of him? And of course, everybody loved him. And they were like, oh, Dana, no, you guys are like our two favorite people. You guys make this amazing couple. You can trust him. He's a good guy. And my mistake was not listening to myself. I'm not by any stretch blaming them. They didn't pick up on the same stuff that I'd picked up on, right? Like they weren't me. And so we can't ever, kind of like, abdicate our, our judgment. We can't just say like, okay, I'm not going to trust myself and I'm going to trust somebody else instead. Like that's generally a really bad idea. If you can't trust your judgment, please, please, please do not be dating, because there's like people don't know. Like everybody has this idea of what problematic behavior looks like, what a sociopath looks like, what a narcissist looks like, how they act, and most people are wrong. So, even well-intended people, and there's no shortage of like well-intended bad advice out there. The reality is only trust your judgment. And I know you're going to doubt it for a while, and that's normal. That's part, oh gosh, I almost knocked that over. And that's part of it. Like you're going to be full of doubt and a total emotional wreck for a while. And that's normal. And, just try to ride it out as much as you possibly can. Be extra good to yourself. Just focus on your healing and being around people that make you feel good. I think at this time, if you're fresh out of a relationship, it's a good idea to for sure don't date for like a solid 6 months, and ideally too, like avoid making new friendships. In the book Psychopath Free, Jackson talks about that. I had never thought about that. But he's absolutely right, because again, like problematic people, emotional manipulators come in all walks of our life. They're not just significant others. They can be friends, quote unquote friends. They can be coworkers. They can be somebody at your church. They can be somebody you volunteer with. They can be a next door neighbor. And so that's another thing a lot of people do is, myself included, is they learn the wrong lessons from this. So the lessons that I learned, so the crazy guy that I dated in high school, you know, it's, our brains link up, like what is different about the situation. And so for me, it was like, well, it was, he was older than I was. He had been in a gang. He'd been in jail, stuff like that, where I told myself, like, I'm never dating anybody like that again. I'm never, and again, I never have. But Jack and Steve came across very differently. And so my radar wasn't set to scan for that kind of behavior. And if you're thinking about, trying to, so a lot of people will tell themselves, like, okay, I am going to avoid a person who yells, or I'm going to avoid a person who's a Scorpio, or who's an attorney, or who is a truck driver, or who is a redhead, or, who is, a bartender, right? So like we start linking up all of these things. We're thinking that these are the causes of their problematic behavior because we don't know what problematic behavior really looks like. And so our brain is linking up all of these external factors, trying to piece together this puzzle to keep us safe. But if we're learning the wrong lessons, we're going to keep going around that mountain until we get those lessons right. And that's what happened to me. That's exactly why I ended up dating Steve. Like I didn't learn a lot of the right lessons the first time. And there's no shortage of problematic people out there, but again, like once you can spot the behavior, you can spot it a mile away. Here's the kicker to that though, too, is that other people, your friends and family, maybe even your therapist, might be telling you that you're being hypervigilant. Because you're able to now, you're probably going to be spotting problematic behavior in a lot of people. That's very normal. And a lot of people really do have problematic behavior. So, it, like, my friend, we talk a lot about this. She was married to a narcissist for a while, had a ton of problematic behavior. He was just into all kinds of crazy stuff. It was just awful. And she refers to her life, and I think I might run with this because I really like it. She refers to her life in terms of before consciousness and after consciousness. And I thought that was a great way to say it because she was like, I feel like I've been driving through life with like a paper bag over my head. Like I didn't know what problematic behavior looked like. I didn't know myself. I didn't pay attention to my feelings. Like I didn't know. And I was going through life, like not knowing who I was or what I was about or what my gut instincts were telling me, or, I was doubting all of this problematic behavior. And she's like, it's a miracle that anything has worked out in her life. And I like, dude, I hear you. Like, I feel the exact same way. It's just, but again, like having faith in your judgment of knowing, and like, deep down of what is right, when you're on track and when you're off track, it's that feeling when you're on track. It's that feeling of clarity. It's that feeling of just absolute knowing. It's that feeling of being really excited and being juiced and feeling alive and just certainty. It's clarity and it's certainty. When you're off track, it's doubt, it's confusion, it's anxiety, it's depression, it's chaos is a great sign. It's things not working out. It's problematic people. It's problematic situations. It's that nagging feeling that you don't belong here. It's, uncomfortable emotions is what it is. Like when you're living an authentic life and you're in alignment with who you are and kind of what I believe that we all have a purpose. Like when you're in alignment with your purpose and you're living a life of purpose on purpose, it's you are in flow. Like it's just almost effortless because you're doing what you love. You're around people that you feel empowered by. Like there's this common theme of empowerment across the board, like with your job, with your friends, with, you know, how you spend your time, with your hobbies, all of that. If you find yourself that feeling of like swimming upstream, that's the sign that something's off, like something needs to give. And, just again, like knowing yourself will clear up a lot of that doubt and, really just figuring out, how do I feel about this? Do I have clarity? Or do I have confusion? So, okay, let me see. Marie says, with him, he is so sweet to me, but when he's with his friends and everything else is awful. Yeah. So like, if you really want to know who a person is, look at who they associate with. I think that's a great way, because everybody can put on this, good behavior, right? Like we can all be like on our best behavior for a few weeks generally, right? And then you start to see kind of things that don't line up with the person, right? Or obviously, especially like emotional manipulators, right? Because who they claim to be and who they really are two very different people. Normal people aren't two very different people. Normal people, aren't really, kind and compassionate some of the time, and then absolute jerks others of the time. Like there tends to not be this like polarity within them. Emotional manipulators, there is that they two very different people like sharing a body, and that's not normal. So if you're seeing that in a person, who they are around their friends, or really like if you're seeing a person's bad behavior, like that's really kind of who they are. Because we can all pretend to be on our good behavior, but you really see who a person is when they go through stress, when they go through struggle, when life gets hard, when things don't go their way. Like that's who a person really is. So I would, that's a big red flag. Okay, Carolyn, great comment, says, the confusion thing is hard for me to recognize as a red flag because I self-doubt and I criticize a lot anyway. Yes, very common. I can totally relate. And it takes practice. Like it takes practice. And I hate to sound like this is harder than it is, but the only description that I can think of that comes to mind right now is, remember those magic eye paintings that were like all the rage? I don't even know, 10 or so years ago. They sold them in the mall, and like you had to stand at a distance and you had to kind of blur your eyes, and then you'd like move a little closer to them, and then you'd see this image like pop out at you. It's the same thing with learning to trust your judgment and spotting problematic behavior. At first, it all blurs together. It's a lot of self-doubt. It's that you can't quite tell like what you're looking at, right? But like just like that magic eye painting or poster, once you see it, you see it. But like I can tell you, okay, you got to squint your eyes, you got to back up a little bit, you got to move forward a little bit, you got to just relax your eyes, and then the image is gonna come forward. I can walk you through it to a point. Sometimes, a lot of times, it's just you'll see it, like it'll just happen. And I think it's the same thing with trusting your intuition, with kind of move, if you're in a state of constant confusion, and everything is confusion, then, well, frankly, if everything in your life is confusion with behavior, then there's a lot of problems going on. And it's not you. So again, like within the book Psychopath Free, right? He uses the example of the concept that he calls a constant. So it's that one person in your life, whether it's your child, a good friend, a sister, a parent, whoever that you feel safe and secure around, that you trust, that you have clarity with, like you are at peace with this person, like you feel safe and secure. That person is your constant. And so and I think that's a really great way to kind of gauge problematic behavior. So if this person is your constant and you find yourself doubting, like you've got this other person in your life and you find yourself doubting things and wondering, is it them or is it me? And I'm confused and I can't tell. And all of this confusion sets in, right? Ask yourself, do you feel this way around your constant? Do you feel this way around this other person that you trust completely? Odds are no. So I would encourage you to think about how you feel when you're with that constant person, right? Like you feel clarity, you feel certainty, you feel comfortable, you feel relaxed, you feel, you know, you can open up, you can have a conversation. You feel safe and you feel secure. With this other person in your life that you have confusion or chaos with, there's a reason that you're feeling that way, and it's not you. So if you know what clarity and certainty and all of this feels like, then you know what the opposite feels like, and then you also know kind of by default what the opposite means, which is problematic behavior. Because normal people, when we are in a normal relationship, there might be times where there's confusion, right? But again, confusion is present when the truth is missing. Things don't add up. That's why there's confusion. So whether or not that's intentional is another story. With an emotional manipulator, it's generally intentional, right? Because they're manipulating, they're lying, they're deceiving. In a normal relationship, if there's confusion, it's resolved quickly, and that other person is accountable. So if you and I were to make dinner plans, right, and I were to say, hey, okay, I'm going to meet you down at the grill at 6 p.m. and I show up at 6:30, right, and you're like, hey, I thought you were going to be here at 6, and then I'm like, oh, right, because then you're confused. You're like, well, wait a minute, I thought you said you were going to be here at 6, and if I was sincere, right, and I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're totally right. Or really, like, did we say 6? I put it in my phone at 6:30. You know, it's resolved quickly that a person's accountable for their behavior, and it's not a pattern. I think that's the other big key element here. Because with emotional manipulators, and I think that's kind of another way to tell too, if what you're dealing with is like quote unquote normal problematic behavior, or if you're dealing with an emotional manipulator. Normal problematic behavior is an event, right? If you're married and your partner cheats on you and it's a one-time thing and they're fully accountable, they're willing to live a life of total transparency, they are doing whatever it takes to repair the damage to that relationship, that's one thing. Okay, that's an event. If it's a pattern of squirrely behavior, they're blaming her, they're blaming you, they're denying it, they're spinning it around, they're not being accountable for their behavior, they're not really working towards a solution, they're not willing to be totally transparent with their behavior, that's problem. So it's the same it's the same behavior, right? Like it's cheating. It's the way they handle it that's very different. And that's how you can kind of tell, where you are in that mix. And if you're dealing with a person that's, how kind of on the scale of problematic, like where are they, right? Because normal people, healthy people even, oftentimes, have had problematic behavior. But again, it's how they handle it. So let me, okay. Okay. NZA says, as weird as it sounds, I wish she was more overtly abusive so then I would know. She didn't abuse me or cheat on me that I know of, so there's no question of whether she's even a narc. Okay, so here, okay, this is a really great point. And a lot of people feel that way. I think I felt that way too because it's validating, right? It's sort of like you with that guy that I dated in high school, I was terrified of him and he never hit me. He never had to. Like he had done enough other things where I just lived in, I mean, he had threatened to kill my brother at one point. I mean, like crazy things. And, you know, like, you know, you have to take somebody seriously when they say stuff like that. But for a while, I didn't identify that as abusive or, you know, I didn't know. And it almost would have been easier had he hit me. Then I would have had something physical, tangible to point to and say, see, this is a problem. And I would have felt validated. And I think other people would have realized, hey, that's a problem because you have a black eye versus he made some threat. Now it's my word against his word. And is maybe he was just being drama or maybe you're just being drama, right? So it's a lot of people I think feel that way because emotional abuse, verbal abuse, psychological abuse, it's more nebulous, right? It's harder to pinpoint exactly what it is. But here's the thing with that, okay? So a person, if you're in a relationship with a person, they don't necessarily, not necessarily, they don't need to be a narcissist or an emotional manipulator in order to be wrong for you. Okay? A person could be amazing. Like they could, you know, be really great. Like they could have a really great personality and be kind and compassionate and caring and, you know, just financially stable and emotionally stable. And, you know, you guys could have a ton in common and it's still that chemistry is not there. Or, you know, like you're just not physically attracted to them. So a person can just be not right for you. They don't need to be like full, you know, full out, like, you know, they don't need to be like full narcissist, right? Like just not right for you is enough. And that's okay. So, and this goes back to knowing yourself. Like for me, I felt obligated to stay in relationships unless something was really, really wrong. Then, and I don't know where I got that from. I really don't. But it was just kind of this, I made a commitment, so I need to stick with it through hell or high water. And unless I can prove without a shadow of a doubt that there's problematic behavior going on. I mentioned this in the last live stream. I had gone out with this one guy briefly. This was a little over a year ago. I was actually that brief relationship that sparked my blog and sparked all of this because I was making myself nuts trying to figure out, I was seeing problematic behavior. My night terrors were kicking up again. You know, like feeling paranoid, not trusting my judgment. I was asking everybody, you know, what do you think of this? Is it, you know, is it him or is it me or is this weird or am I weird? Like what's going on? And somebody had said to me, you know, Dana, like you've seen this movie before. Like you don't have to sit here all the way through it, wait till the bitter end to get up and walk out. And for some reason that just really resonated with me because I guess I hadn't thought about that. Because again, like when you're with an emotional manipulator, the good times are really good. And so it's hard to walk away from that. You know, it's sort of like, I need to know, I need to experience really problematic behavior in order to let go, because the good times are so good. And it's so hard to find with somebody else because they're not real. Like a normal person can't compete with the good times of an emotional manipulator because they're mirroring us, right? They're studying us. They're reflecting back to us everything that we want. They're future faking. They're love bombing, right? They're doing all of these things. It's not real. Like normal, healthy people don't do those things. So there's not that level of intensity. See, our problem is we're mistaking that level of intensity for sincerity and for love, and it's not. It's manipulation. And until we see that behavior as problematic, we're going to continue to get tangled up in it. And it can be really hard to slow things down. But, again, like if a person's coming out of the gate right away and they're like, you're like, oh, ciao, Bella, like you're beautiful, you're amazing, I want to marry you, I want to, ta 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 ta. When they're doing all of that, like that needs to not be flattering, right? Like that needs to be a red flag, because it is a red flag. They want something, like, and asking yourself, this person's really buttering me up. Like, why are they buttering me up? And, and then kind of, why am I falling for it? Because it generally has to do, at first we don't know better, because a lot of us didn't even know that these people even existed. And if we did know that they existed, we thought we'd be able to see them coming, and if we did see them coming, that they'd look and act very different, right? So now that we know, okay, this is how they come across, this is how problematic behavior looks in motion, and examining our empty buckets. Because like I said earlier, it's the whole hungry hearts eat lies. So if we're feeling starved out, if we're feeling lonely or unimportant or unloved, or kind of fearful for whatever reason, I have known a couple people now that have emailed and said that their empty bucket was the empty bucket of security, that they grew up where they were moving around a lot, or that they had a parent who was an alcoholic or an addict or mentally ill, and there wasn't stability in their house. And so they clung to relationships, and it didn't matter how bad things got, they stayed there and they hadn't realized it before until the video I did on empty buckets, but they were like, that's why I was staying. It was kind of like this inner child in them that just craved stability at all cost. But once we're aware of these subconscious behaviors, because that's the thing, is it's subconscious. I mean, right? Like once we know better, we can do better. It's just bringing this to our conscious awareness. Okay. Constantino says, Dana, please look into streaming on younow.com. I've never heard of it. I will check it out. I'm open to it. I'm open to change. There's another site called Blab. younow.com. I've heard Blab is cool. I haven't even looked at it. I don't know. I know Facebook has a live streaming thing now too, which I can experiment with. So, and maybe we'll end up doing a few different types of live streaming all at once. Whoa, I know. Crazy, huh? So we'll see. Okay, Rosario says, do you believe that a narcissist can have full functioning autism? This is what my covert ex-narcissist says what he has. Here's the thing, okay? So an autistic person, they may have challenges as far as, appropriate interpersonal skills. They might have challenges as far as, empathy, right? Again, kind of like appropriate social skills. They're not manipulative. right? They're just kind of in their own little world. So there's the difference. If you're experiencing an emotional manipulator, that's not autism. Like, that's being an emotional manipulator. Autistic people on the spectrum, they're in their, they tend, they're as infants, they have poor eye contact. They've retreated into themselves. That's a big part of their disorder. They're not manipulating, they're not lying, they're not gaslighting, they're not stealing, they're not cheating, they're not pot stirring, they're not doing all of that. Now, a person can have a developmental disability like autism and a personality disorder and or a mental illness. People can have more than one thing going on with them, but if he's got emotional manipulator kind of behavior, it's probably not due to the autism. It's probably more due to like a personality disorder in addition to that, would be my guess. But, regardless, if it's problematic no matter what it is, right? So even if a person, let's say they have a brain injury, right? Like, they are totally fine. They get in a car accident and now they have a brain injury to where they have really poor emotional regulation and they fly into violent rages. Okay? It's not a personality disorder. It's a brain disorder, right? Like, this happened. If you were, had this amazing relationship with this person before their accident, now they've had this accident, now they're violent and unpredictable, it would be a good idea to distance yourself to a place where you can stay safe. So it doesn't matter kind of the cause of a person, and that might sound cold and cruel to some people, but we can't be putting ourselves in danger for any reason. Like, that doesn't even make sense, right? Like, you can still love a person and stay at arm's length and be like, I'm willing to be here and to support this person and at a place where I can stay safe and sane. But if they're have violent, dangerous, destructive behavior and they're targeting you, right? It would be wise to not be around them. So, it doesn't matter if a person's behavior is dangerous or destructive. It's a good idea to keep a safe distance and not destroy yourself. And that's part of just healthy boundaries. Carolyn says, I would love to go to a convention weekend to hear and interact with my favorite YouTube channel owners. How do we rope you folks into that? LOL. I think that would be fantastic. I would love to do something like that. Who all would you want to see? And then I can see if I can rope them into doing it. It's difficult because, Richard lives in London, the UK, somewhere. Ross Rosenberg lives close by. I live in Michigan. Ross lives in Chicago, which is like 5 hours away. Melanie Tanya Evans lives in Australia. Sam Vaknin lives, I want to say, Macedonia. I could have just totally pulled that out of thin air, and I could be very off on that. But yeah, all of us live like way crazy far away. BB says like a discussion panel would be cool. Yeah, it really would be. Even if we did, like, due to the distance, although I would love an excuse to go to Australia. I think it'd be really neat to do a series of videos where maybe we all answer the same question or kind of just chime in on the same question. because I think all of us are coming from this from very different perspectives. And I think that we all have something to offer, and that's the thing, like different speakers resonate with different people at different times. So somebody, may really, they're like, oh man, yeah, that's where it's at. Like Dana, boy, those red flags, that was really helpful. And then maybe they find that they kind of, I don't know, maybe they burn out on my videos, maybe they kind of, whatever. And but then Richard really resonates with them, and then they like binge watch Richard stuff, right? And then they kind of, they're like, okay, this is good, and they kind of hop over to somebody else. So but there's lots of speakers out there. I have been oh, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. There's a lot of kind of budding YouTubers out there that are talking on this topic as well, which I think, for me, it's more of an issue of time, because I also work full time, and it's also an issue of organization, because that's been a real challenge trying to keep all of this somewhat straight. I would really like to get to the place where I am organized enough and I have enough time and I can start scheduling things to where I can start interviewing and talking to, all of the YouTubers that are in this area. Because like I said, I think all of them have, not just like the bigger ones, but all of them at any size, channel size, have something to offer. And again, like healing is such an individual process where, again, like I could be talking all day long and it might not resonate with somebody, and then somebody else might say something and it's exactly what that particular person just needs to hear at that time. So I would like to get to the place where I can kind of provide a platform for other speakers and again, just like open up these conversations to other people. So I love that. Bear says, you are healed when red flags become deal breakers. Yep, I love it. Like, boom, drops mic. Because that's really what it is. In what a red flag is going to vary from person to person, right? And like what we talked about earlier is it may or may not be like that problematic to somebody else, but it might be to you. So there was a gal in the support group the other day where, she had quite a few children. Like 5 or 6 kids, and she'd met a guy who had said he didn't want to have kids. And, she was talking more kind of about the situation and trying to figure out like what red flags were. And for me, the red flag was that he didn't want to have kids and she had 5 or 6. So like different people are going to pick up on different things, and everybody's, got something. I mean, if you meet a person who wants to raise alpacas and you're, really allergic to alpacas, like that's going to be a deal breaker. So, it's just kind of knowing yourself. It doesn't mean that the person's bad or that alpacas are bad, or, it doesn't have to be all that. It just means like this does not work for me in my life and what I want. So that would be fantastic. Carolyn, you are hired. You're the new PR person. She says, I'd love to go to conventions with multiple tracks like Q&A, book readings, red flag panels, coping strategies, education on EMDR, etc. That is flipping brilliant. I love that idea. Yeah, Marie says, Carolyn's red flag panel. Yeah. So, okay, so here's another big deal breaker thing. Overcoming Understanding says, I don't trust a man who doesn't like animals. Yeah, for the most part, I'm very like kind of suspicious of people that don't like animals. I guess it's because I love animals, so I find it really weird when other people don't. But that being said, too, Jack and Steve were both fantastic with animals. So again, it's one of those things like certain behaviors can be telling, but you kind of have to look at the whole picture and see what problematic behavior is there. Because they might not have problematic behavior that you're looking for, but there might be other stuff that's there. Chirpa 52 says, how can I handle the anger I have at my son for getting back with his narcissist? Anger, that's an interesting emotion. When a person is in an abusive relationship of any kind, whether it's emotional, physical, kind of what have you, it really oftentimes burns out their friends and family because it's so hard for them to sit back and to watch all of this unfold again and again and again. Statistically speaking, on average, a person goes back 7 times before they leave for good. And if it's a dangerous relationship, 7 times before they leave for good or they're killed. So it's part of it. It's part of it. It's sort of like it takes practice quitting. I would encourage you, I don't know the relationship you have with your son, but if you would be comfortable, giving him a link maybe to my videos or and again, like it's hard because when a person's in that fog of cognitive dissonance, they're wanting that relationship to work out. They're wanting to, they're glorifying the good and they're minimizing the bad. It can be really hard to get through to them. If they go on the outs again, you might want to mention, hey, son, look up gaslighting, look up narcissism and see. I think if he could get into a support group, even if he doesn't participate, even if he just reads other stories, especially other stories from men, then I think he'll be able to more readily see the problematic behavior that this woman has. Because I think a lot of women or a lot of men, tend to, like the way that they justify a woman's bad behaviors, they think, well, all, good looking women are problematic, right? Like it's sort of like that saying, like the hotter she is, the crazier she is. And like, that's not true. So, just people gloss over stuff, or they say women are hormonal, right? Or, these are like common excuses for women's bad behavior, but it's not okay. It's never okay to have bad behavior, to have abusive behavior, right? But a lot of men get caught up in that. And it's in that kind of mindset, it's often reinforced by other guys that they're hanging out with. And guys tend to not talk about this kind of stuff from what I hear, with other guys, which makes sense. Because, women, it's more socially acceptable. We talk about everything, all the time. Men tend to not be that way so much. And so when they're going through a confusing experience like this, especially if it's an abusive relationship, there's that added component of, confusion, isolation, and then embarrassment and shame, thinking, oh, well, she really wears the pants. And I think it can be very like emasculating for a lot of men. So they oftentimes have a hard time, they have a hard time getting out of it because they're like, there's so many components at play. If she's love bombing him again, and it's the cycle. This is the cycle of narcissistic abuse. It runs a very set course of idealize, devalue, discard. The more education he can do on what he's experiencing, the better he'll stand a chance at actually getting away from this. So, my website is called thriveafterabuse.com. all of my contact info for, my website and my support group and all of that. It's in my YouTube about page. And I would say maybe see if he's open to sitting in a group and chatting with some men. I think, and I'm sure that there's probably some men's only groups out there. But if he comes into the group, and if we kind of know ahead of time, who he is and stuff, I can see if some of the guys in the group can reach out to him and talk to him. But I think watching the red flag videos, a lot of stuff was going to make a lot of sense. Okay, hold on, let me scroll up here. Yeah, Tara says, from my experience as a victim of abuse, I was addicted to the cycle. Breaking it means leaving the good feeling chemicals for a very long time. And that's really what it is. It's really hard when there is all of that love bombing, because it feels so good. And a person, she's probably coming across like his ultimate woman. She's saying and doing everything where he's feeling like the luckiest guy in the world, because that's what they do. So it's the good times are really good, the bad times are really bad. And when you're in it, it takes about 7 times to really see the extent of the problematic behavior, because we all, right, tend to project our good behavior, our conscience, our empathy, our our worldview onto other people. Like, that's just kind of a normal human trait that normally works, right? Except when you're dealing with a highly problematic person like an emotional manipulator. Because here we are thinking we believe them, right? If they're like, oh, I'm really sorry, or, kind of, oh, it's due to my childhood or whatever. We want to believe them, and so we give them the benefit of the doubt. We take all these, we accept all their excuses, and that's how they manipulate. Let me write it down real quick because I have a hard time remembering it. There's an acronym I came up with a while back with how emotional manipulators manipulate, and it's called ICHIVE, and it stands for isolation, charm, hope, intimidation, violence, and emotion. And under emotion is the sub acronym of FLOG, which stands for fear, love, obligation, and guilt. And so it's that all of those together is how they weave their web and like lure people in and keep them there. But yeah, I would see if he'd be willing to sit in an online support group, and just even for an hour, and do some reading. And it's hard. It's got to be so hard. I can only imagine, like, being a parent and watching your child go through this. And you might want to ask him to just say, is this the kind of woman that you want to have children with? Is this the kind of woman that if you did have children, that they would be glad that she was their mother? And try to kind of get him to think about her behavior from like somebody else's point of view, because I think sometimes it can be easier to see that way. Okay, Dr. Cool, 29, says, how do I deal with the rage? I am angry all of the time. I've been married to a covert narcissist for 16 years. Everything is an argument. I find myself so angry and crying all of the time. Please help. Okay, so let me stop the chat. With this, hold on a second here. Urge. I think it's really helpful to realize that we're not sharing the same reality with an emotional manipulator. The book, Patricia Evans, fantastic author. She's written a handful of books. She talks a lot about like emotional and verbal abuse and controlling people is the title of one of her books. And she really does a great job at explaining this. Because, okay, so at the core of all abusive behavior is power and control. That's what abusive people are after. That's what drives all abusive behavior is getting power and control over another person or over another situation. Abusive, that's their mindset, right? Is their goal is to try to get power and control, right? Our mindset tends to be one of cooperation, of she calls it mutuality. So like teamwork, right? So we're solutions oriented. So if there's some sort of situation that comes up, we're trying to find a solution, whereas the emotional manipulator is just trying to argue so they can win. Once you realize that they don't have the same goal, that it's an exercise in frustration and futility, which is what you're finding. Arguing with somebody who is using all kinds of logical fallacies. They're you can't be logical and rational with an illogical, irrational person. Like that is crazy making, and it's easy to get roped into that, right? So I would encourage you to, if you can slow down and see it and realize and fully realize they're not arguing to try to find a solution. They're arguing to try to prove a point. They're arguing to try to make me upset. They're arguing to try to get power and control over me and over the situation. So I am not going to fall for it. I'm not going to get baited into an argument that they're going to keep shifting it, right? They're going to keep shifting it and spinning it. And then it's like trying to nail Jello to the wall because they're not looking for a solution. They're looking to argue. And then, so the first part is realizing that you're not sharing the same reality with them. That's huge. Like that is like game changer huge right there, right? You're solutions oriented. They just want to fight. They're driven by power and control. The other part of that is accepting, not saying like you need to be okay with their behavior, but fully accepting like this is their mindset. They are wired differently for whatever reason. And that you're not going to play. Like you're not going to play this game anymore because it's upsetting. So to try to emotionally detach from this situation as much as possible, realize that this is a game to them and that you're not going to get upset. You're going to see the game for what it is. And it's very much like a child, right? That's trying to manipulate or get their way or throw a temper tantrum. You can kind of tell when it's coming on, right? It's oftentimes the same way with an emotional manipulator who's trying to pick a fight. If you can kind of see that train coming down the track, to distance yourself and not get caught up in trying to have an effective argument or trying to even win the argument, because you can't ever win an argument because they're going to keep shifting things around. Then they're going to, it's frustrating and it's crazy making. And yeah, right. Tricia says, observe, don't absorb. And that's, I don't know. I know Ross uses that phrase. I don't know if that's a specific phrase to him, but I love it. I love that phrase because it's so right on. And so when you can learn to, and it takes practice, right? It takes practice because they know the buttons to push, right? Especially if you've ever gone to therapy with them, then they really know the buttons to push. So Anticipation. Like that's the biggest tool in our toolkit when dealing with an emotional manipulator is the power of anticipation. You know, like what does he normally go after you or she go after you for? You know, is it kind of the same things over and over again? Is because generally it might be about money or parenting or, you know, your weight, you know, these kinds of things. If it's that kind of stuff, if you can kind of see that train coming down the track, then you can just jump out of the way and get real busy. You can just avoid. The thing is, setting boundaries with an emotional manipulator that can also really be an exercise in futility and frustration because they don't care, because they're about winning. They're about getting power and control over the situation and over other people. They do not respect us. Like, you know, they don't honor boundaries. Like they don't care. So, and that can be exhausting to continually having to like set boundaries and reset boundaries. And part of setting boundaries is at first, you know, like asserting yourself and being like, this is not okay with me. Like, this is my boundary, right? The other part of boundaries is at some point then saying, now there's going to be consequences. Like, I'm going to leave. So, and then doing as much as you possibly can to stay safe and sane and to enjoy your life. You know, if you feel stuck in this marriage for whatever reason, then hold on, let me stop the chat here because there's some good questions. You know, if you feel stuck in this marriage and you don't want to leave, and for whatever reason, but you feel like you're making yourself crazy by staying, then I would say really try to find some sort of peace and enjoyment and joy in your life. And although it helps to have like the conditions of your life line up with that, right? It helps to come home to a house with a pleasant partner, right? But if that's not going to happen, then I would try to find joy in other ways and make up your mind, like make up your mind right now, this moment, that you are not going to let her steal any more of your joy or your happiness. Like, she can act a fool. She can pitch a fight. She can pitch a fit. She can do whatever she wants to do. But the more you practice detaching emotionally and observing her behavior, again, it's a lot like a child throwing a temper tantrum in a store, right? You get angry, like you get frustrated, but you don't make it personal. You just kind of realize like, that's just how they are. And now I'm going to handle it. And, you know, you drive on. It's the same thing with adults that act the same way. So Truth Seeker says, how do you deal with silent treatment? If you leave, it feels like they dismissed you. Trisha says she said, I hate the silent treatment. It's so very cruel. Silent treatment is very dismissive. I think that's the purpose of it. It's a punishing, grooming behavior. It's saying, if you do this to me, then I am going to freeze you out, right? I'll teach you, like, you think you're gonna, whatever, bring up any issue that you have with me. Well, I'm just not going to talk to you from here on out. It's abusive. Even though nothing's being said, it's actually verbally and emotionally and psychologically abusive to do that to a person. So, you know, you can try setting a boundary, saying, you know, again, like, if they're truly an emotional manipulator, because a lot of people do silent treatment, right? Like, even though they're not a narcissist or, you know, whatever. If you're dealing with an emotional manipulator, again, realizing that they're not trying to reach a solution, they're not trying to be mature about it, they're just trying to gain power and control by any means necessary. If you're not dealing with an emotional manipulator, you're dealing with somebody that has some, you know, bad habits, and that's one of them. You can say, hey, you know what? I get it. Like, if you're upset and you don't want to talk right now, that's fine. But, you know, can you give me a time frame? as to when you want to resume this conversation. So that way, you're not twisting in the wind, wondering if you're ever going to talk to them again, because that's what that does, and it's really, really hurtful. That's how normal people handle fighting, and it's because it's okay to be like, you know what, I am really upset right now. We need to. I am gonna say things I'm gonna regret. I just need to not talk. So I'm gonna go for a walk, or I'm gonna go for a drive, or I'm gonna do whatever. I'll be back in a few hours, and then we can talk about things. Like, that's a mature, appropriate response. If a person continues to give silent treatment and they, and they don't change. I mean, again, like a lot of that stuff, the older I get, my tolerance for nonsense like that it's like nil. Like, it's a thin line. And, to me, that would be deal breaker. I mean, any type of abusive behavior for me would be a deal breaker. And I think for a lot of people, it would be a deal breaker too. Somebody asked me the other day about what is normal deal breaker stuff in a relationship. So let me just kind of like go into that. For me, and I think for most people out there, normal deal breaker stuff in a relationship is any form of abuse, addiction, or adultery. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily. So you have like abuse, addiction, adultery. Then you also have to look at, is it an event or is it a pattern? And how are they handling it? What were the circumstances surrounding it? Are they sincerely apologetic? Are they working towards a solution? I mean, that right there is so huge. Like, if they have sincere accountability and they're working towards a sincere solution, and they are willing to live a life of total transparency, and they're willing to work as a team to restore the relationship, that's one thing. If you're not getting that, if they're still, they're blaming and denying and spinning and gaslighting, and, they're just being squirrely about stuff, then there's your answer. Like, there is no relationship with somebody like that. If a person, takes two people being open, honest, and sincere, and having solutions-oriented communication for a relationship to happen. And it also takes dignity and respect. And if those elements aren't there, then there is no relationship. And then the question comes in of, well, how long, are you going to hang on? Because what you're in is a manipulationship, not a relationship. It's a manipulationship with a person who's trying to consistently gain and keep power and control over you and over the situation. And, again, like, everybody has their own line in the sand for what's okay for them. But, the thing that only you can answer. Okay, let me scroll down. Okay, Marie says, okay, actually real quick. Nora says, oh gosh, there's so many great comments. Like, I can't decide. Okay, we're going to go Nora and then Marie and then Dr. Cool. Nora says, Dana, I don't know what to do. One of my ex-narcissists will not stop expressing love, saying he wants me in his life, says he does not know what he's doing with himself, and he owes me money. Yeah. This is, okay, so what he's doing is called a Hoover, and this is what they typically do. So a Hoover is based off of, it's a word that comes from the Hoover vacuum, and it's where an emotional manipulator comes back around with generally things like this, right? It's that love bombing. It's like love bombing light. right? Another term for it's called dosing, where it's kind of just they're telling you like the bare minimum of what they need to say in order to get access back into your life, to suck you back in, like the Hoover vacuum, suck you back into that dynamic. So you can go around that cycle yet again, that idealize, devalue, discard cycle again. So, you know, to me, all of this is a bunch of nonsense on his behalf. He's if he owed, and I would tell him, say, you know what, I would consider possibly letting you back into my life as soon as you repay me. Like, I think that's reasonable, and odds are he's going to be upset about that. And he's not going to like it. And he's going to tell you that you're greedy and that you're selfish and that you're cruel and that he needs you and that, that you're a bad person for not letting him back in your life. And if he doesn't know what he's doing with himself, then maybe that's code for he doesn't have a job, he needs money, he needs a place to stay. Emotional manipulators, when they hoover around, they're hoovering around because they need something, because they use people. So when you've got a user, right, that it's knocking on your door, it's because they want to use you. So then kind of the question, if it even goes that far, I mean, for me, that would be enough of, I need that, like I need a freaking stub my toe. Like I don't need that at all in my life. If you've got a problematic person, who's using and abusing you, coming back around, wanting to reopen contact, you're not obligated to reopen contact. You're not obligated to let them back into your life. They will do that. They'll do the whole pity party thing. I have a video on hoovering that goes over a lot of the common hoovers. But really, as far as I'm concerned, any type of communication from an emotional manipulator is a hoover, in my opinion. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if they say, hey, like, happy birthday, or I miss you, or I hate you, or, my mother's in the hospital. It does not matter. All of it should be, it's all an excuse to reopen communication with the intention of reopening that dynamic and using you for some sort of reason. And the money that he owes you, because, odds are he's not going to repay you. And if he does, then what they tend to do is they'll drip it out. So they'll just, again, it's just kind of like stringing you along because it's all about power and control for them. So they don't care that they owe, you money. Like, they don't. Like, so he might repay you a little bit here and there to kind of give you that false hope that maybe you really will get repaid in full. Like, realistically, you probably won't. If you were to get repaid in full, then it would be to save his public image and to potentially, again, like reopen contact so he can manipulate you and use you even more the next time. It's a no-win situation. These people bring nothing but hurt and heartache wherever they go. So it's just, I would just steer clear. Marie says, Dana, should I get off dating sites? Are they full of narcs? People are saying that they are. There's a lot of emotional manipulators, narcissists, sociopaths, etc. on dating sites. Yes, because it's a really great way, because they lure people in with their words, right? So they can type up a profile. Anybody can be anything on the internet, right? Especially with online dating. So, and it's really like the narcissist's playground, especially on the free dating sites like Tinder, like Plenty of Fish, and again, they're out there. There's a lot of problematic people out there. Once you know how to spot problematic behavior, then you're fine. You can walk in a narcissist convention and not break a sweat because like you're going to know, okay, this is what, you steer clear of people as that behavior surfaces. It's the same thing with online dating. But you have to know what to look for. And in a lot of knowing what to look for. So you have my red flags of a narcissist series. I did another playlist that's on how to avoid dating or befriending narcissists too, which I highly recommend because I go into more depth about that. But it's the same kind of stuff. It's just online. So watching out for somebody who's love bombing, watching out for somebody who starts talking about marriage and commitment and love and or being a little like too flirty like right away. Stuff like that. Like all of that's red flags. Lots of people that are on dating sites are looking for sex. So you have to kind of screen for that and see, and there's like little giveaways, right? So a person, if they start getting flirty and they start talking about, or they start sending you like kind of sexy pictures of themselves, or they're signing the end of a text or an email with like XXX, right? Or like XO, or if it's behavior that you would think would be weird if they were to do it in person, then it's still weird. Like it's still weird even though it's on text or over email. If they're coming across like they are the world's greatest guy or girl, right? And you're reading this and you're thinking, wow, this is my lucky day. Like this person is just, they're so charming. They're so amazing. Really, I think too, if you find yourself using the word charming to describe a person, being charming is never generally a good thing or a sincere thing. Like that's there's a difference between being likable, being nice, being witty or outgoing, but charming is generally somebody's trying to be charming. Like they're trying to woo somebody or sweep them off their feet. In the book, The Gift of Fear, Gavin de Becker wrote the book. He talks about that. And he says, if you come across a person who is so charming, ask yourself, why is this person trying to charm me? Because when a person's being charming, it's intentional and it's manipulative. So that was kind of an interesting little side note there. So yes, be careful on dating sites. Again, there's no substitution for time and for going with your gut instinct, because you really do know. And I go through all of this in that video series. I talk about not spending a lot of time emailing and texting and all that back and forth. Like you want to move very quickly from email to phone and I'm not investing a lot of time. Okay, because anybody can be anything, or they could have really old pictures. You don't know. So just spending, enough time to where you think, okay, there's a connection. Let me talk to them over the phone. Let me see if there's a connection over the phone. And then if there's a connection there, then setting up a really short date. Like you are meeting for coffee, not dinner, not a movie, not a festival in the park, like none of that. Like you're meeting for a cup of coffee, and then for like 45 minutes tops. That's it. That's your first date. And then the next date you can spend a little bit more time, but just seeing if there's chemistry, if there's a connection, how you feel when you're around them, moving slow, because emotional manipulators, they move fast. And so it's important that all of us, right? Like we maintain our power and control at all times in every area of our life. Like that's not being hypervigilant. It's not being paranoid. It's being responsible. And it's being respectful of ourselves and of our time and of our emotions and of our money, right? Like that's just respecting ourselves. So, moving slow, because you set the pace of the relationship. And if a normal, healthy person is going to be okay with that, an emotional manipulator will not. They will continue to push. So if you say, I'm not going to have sex until I'm married, or I don't have sex until, I've gone out with somebody for at least 90 days, or, whatever, a month or whatever. they're going to, because their actions and words don't line up, right? Because it's whatever they want. So they're going to say, oh yeah, they're going to agree with everything, but then they're going to keep pushing those boundaries until they get what they want. So you hold the line. And a lot of too with dating is getting to the place where you like yourself, you like your life. You're not dating to try to not be lonely, right? Because then that's you're very vulnerable, and you're not going to be making good decisions if you're lonely, and that's why you're dating. So building up a life that you really love, and being very selective about who you let into your inner circle. And ideally, not even ideally, like, I think a good rule of thumb is only letting people in your inner circle, whether it's a significant other or friends or both, that empower you and that enhance your life. If they drag you down or bring you down in any way, shape, or form, or if it's just kind of like this meh kind of dynamic, you don't need that. Like, you deserve more, right? So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. Okay, Dr. Cool says, I will join today. I really didn't know anything about narcissists. I am just waking up to all of this. For too long, I knew something was not right. I was told I was too sensitive if I raise any of my concerns. Yes. So that's very common. That's emotional manipulators, because they're not accountable for their actions, right? So they will say things like, "Oh, you're being too sensitive. You're too emotional." They downplay their behavior, but so Richard, Spartan Life Coach, and I did a video a few weeks ago, and one of the things that he said I just love, and he was so right on about this. He had made the comment that part of the confusion in these situations is that we don't have the vocabulary to accurately or adequately describe what we're going through. It's just kind of that low grade feeling of something's not right. And I think a lot of people, that feeling of not right, it grows over time. So people find themselves with all kinds of other issues. They find themselves with anxiety or depression or constipation or headaches or high blood pressure or all these different kinds of ailments, not realizing that one of the biggest factors is they're undergoing emotional and verbal and psychological abuse that they don't realize is emotional and verbal and psychological abuse. Because especially if the person's not outright calling, names, if it's just that subtle grinding down of, it's kind of that diminishing kind of behavior. It's different jabs at a person. I think that kind is the worst, because it takes years, if not decades, to really see. Ryan says, I was told I was too sensitive all the time. Yep. Very, very common to be told that. Okay, let me scroll up here. Yeah, Hippie Go Lucky says, I know it's totally okay, but I think it'd be better if you just look to meet people, to hang out and stuff, and hopefully you'll fall in love with one of them. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's so much better when you meet a person kind of through like the natural course of life, doing things that you love. And of course that's harder like the older we get, right? Or at least it can be, but it doesn't have to be. So there's a website I love. I'm not sponsored by them, although I should be because I mention them all the time. But there's a website I highly recommend. It's called meetup.com. Most of the meetups are free. And I would encourage you guys, join a dozen or 24 groups within like a 50-mile radius of where you are around anything. Like, you never know. Like, you never know. You might think that you would never be into Tai Chi or board games or speaking Japanese, right? Or French cooking or whatever. It's fun. It's fun to just get out there and try new things. You're going to meet a lot of different new people. I joined some groups, some meetup groups when I first moved to Michigan because I didn't know anybody out here. And it was fantastic. It was fantastic. I just, it can be hit or miss. It's the general public, right? So some of the groups you're going to be like, these are not my people. And then other groups you're going to be like, I really want to get to know these certain people better. Like, they are totally my people. And you never know where you're going to meet them. But the important thing is you're building a life that you love. Like, that's the key. Like, that's why that works so well, because you're building a life that you love and you're having fun along the way. And that's the whole purpose of that. So when you're building this life that you love and you're like just juiced, right? Like, you're having a great time and, you're feeling like happy and healthy and confident and just well adjusted and you're having a good time anyhow, right? Like, that level of, contentment and satisfaction and confidence in your own life is very sexy. And it's going to attract people to you as friends and possibly as more. I think there's a lot of adults out there that join meetup groups that are hoping to meet other sane, non-skeezy adults. So, it can just really be a great way to go. And you can always, if you don't find any groups that really resonate with you, you can always start your own. I think it's like $60 a year or something to have a meetup group. But, there's all kinds of groups. Like, there's outdoor adventure groups, there's camping groups, there's people that love, pugs or, you name it. And it can be a really great way to get back into life and to meet new people. Codependent Warrior says, I'm 47 and I have no husband. I have been away from the narcissist for a year. I am lonely, but I'd rather be alone than in a bad relationship. Just take your time and let things unfold naturally. I agree. To me, there's nothing more lonely than being in a bad relationship. The loneliest I've ever been in my life was when I was married. And that wasn't even like, really like a bad relationship. He was never home. And when he was home, we were two very different people and didn't have much in common. And it was awful. And I'm sure it was awful for him too. Like, we just sat there in silence. It was awful. So, finding people, again, that like really just energize you and juice you and empower you. And, that's what you want. And they're out there. I know that might seem like idealistic or optimistic right now, especially if you're kind of recovering from all of this. A lot of people too, like, so when I talked about earlier, people saying, common deal breakers are, abuse, addiction, or adultery. A lot of people that are in bad relationships will be like, oh, well, nobody's perfect, or, they think that that's crazy, like that they would have no options if they were to, cut people out based off of abuse, addiction, and adultery. And healthy people, like, they don't even get tangled up with people that have abuse or addiction or adultery. Like, it's just, to them, that seems like really obvious. Like, of course, like, you don't stay with that, or you don't get tangled up with that. So a lot of it has to do with kind of reevaluating our standards and what we're looking for in our life and why. And then examining too, like, where along the line did we start settling for crumbs and thinking that was okay, because it's not okay. And, like, just don't settle. That's it. Because it's a short-term solution, to a long-term problem. And it's going to leave you unsatisfied if you settle. Okay, let me scroll down a little bit. Oh, that's nice. Lisa says, and that's a valid point. Lisa says, I wish I had YouTube and Dana at 16 years old. I would be so ahead of the game by the time I was the age I am now. And Trisha says, Lisa, some people live their whole lives without realizing the person that drives them crazy is a narcissist. We're ahead of the game no matter what age we are. And that is so true. So true, because so many people, my grandmother was one of them. She was married to a narcissist, and he was very covert. He was a minister and came across as Prince Charming and just was full of problematic behavior. To this day, well, she passed away a long time ago, but, up until the day she died, I don't know if she fully understood, like, that it was him, because he'd been spinning everything, telling her she was the reason, blaming all of his affairs and the nonsense and the lies and the irresponsibility and all of it on her. And I don't know, like, how she just didn't see him coming at all. She grew up in a small town. She was very naive, very sheltered, totally took him at face value the whole time. So yeah. And all any of us can do is the best we can with the knowledge we have. Clara says, I can't believe how my mother treats me. It does not even make me sad now. When I told my aunt how my mom treats me, she was crying and I felt emotionless. And I think what's important with that is realizing that normal or healthy people, they don't go around treating other people like that. They don't try to destroy other people. And to realize her behavior, her treatment of you is not a reflection of you. It's not that you weren't enough or that you weren't lovable or that there was something wrong with you. Her behavior is a reflection of her and that there's something wrong with her. So just know that. And it's hard. It's hard, I think, when you have a narcissist as a parent to not take it personally, because it's what you grow up with, and it's what, if they're continually telling you, they're projecting all of their garbage onto you and kind of using you as an emotional or a physical punching bag, then it's really hard to separate and to see like this person has a ton of problematic behavior, and my love can't change her or him, right? There's something within them. Clara says, I'm only 16. Yeah, I think reading a lot about narcissism and joining some support groups, there's lots of support groups on Facebook, can really help to give you some coping strategies to how to detach. There's a strategy called Gray Rock, which is basically where you detach emotionally as much as you possibly can to where you're not engaging with them. You're kind of keeping yourself to a place where you're safe and you're sane. But it really does help to get support from other people. I think there's also a support group on Facebook that's called Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers. So you might find some more like specific validation and clarity joining a group that's specifically for your situation. Doug says, Dana, aren't you getting tired? It's been 3 hours. I'm just saying. And Marie says, Doug, you're such a party pooper. Just kidding. Yeah, I should probably go here pretty soon. I get going on this and then I lose track of time. And then I have the worst time getting up the next morning. Along Cloud 9 says, my narcissist literally made me crazy. I feel bipolar. Okay, that is very common. That whole cycle of, I don't know if you were on earlier, we were talking about this a little bit. They will provoke an emotion, then they'll deny it, then they'll spin it around to where like they're the victim of you. And then, if they're denying it, then that's, it's gaslighting, and it's this whole erosion of a person's identity, and it's erosion of their reality. And that can take a while to get back. So a lot of people, when they get out of a relationship with an emotional manipulator, they oftentimes wonder or ask, they're concerned that they are the abusive partner, that they are manipulative, that they're the narcissist. Because oftentimes they've been told these things. They've been told you're manipulative, you're abusive, you're being difficult. It's always our fault, right? And that can be crazy making, because it's like, well, I don't think I'm manipulative or abusive. Like, in fact, I'm pretty sure, like, you're accusing me of doing stuff that you just did like 5 seconds ago. And it's hard. And it does make a person feel, like really up and down, and it's an emotional roller coaster. And, the book club book that we're reading this month, if you're interested, I highly recommend it. Fantastic book. I think if you are to read any book on this topic of narcissism, kind of sociopathy, psychopathy, I would say read Psychopath Free. It is such a fantastic book. And he really goes into depth about the dynamic and how people feel when they're going through, and it's really wild. And it talks about that, like the feeling crazy, and just the highs and the lows, and the triangulating, and how you can go from being like a normal, nice, grounded person to playing detective, and to feeling crazy, and to paranoia, and to all of this whole wide mix of emotions, and how they're able to create all of these emotions and drive us to the brink of insanity. And a lot of this behavior, because it's so intensely emotional, and it's so on again, off again, up and down, and blaming and spinning, and it's crazy making, it can and oftentimes does push people to suicide. So it's problematic. It's a big deal. And really a big part in this has to do with education, because when you're caught up in it and you're taking them seriously, and you're thinking that you're sharing the same reality, and you think that if only you can just get through to them, right, that the relationship could change, that it could go back to the way that it was, where they're this whole idealized cycle, and they're being so loving and charming and your soulmate. If you don't have the vocabulary for what you're going through, if you don't realize, oh, okay, this is narcissistic abuse, this is idealized, devalue, discard, this is what hoovering is, this is what silent treatment is. If it's so easy and understandable to be lost in that fog when you don't have the words to describe what's going on. So the more you read about all of this, the more you start putting the pieces together, the more you see it for what it is. And it's just like I talked about earlier, it's like with those magic eye posters. Once you see the image pop out at you, you're like, you can't not see it. It's the same thing with these relationships. And that's the benefit of reading about it, of going on YouTube and watching videos from different speakers about it. It's a benefit of joining different support groups on narcissistic abuse, and because it'll give you these aha moments. It'll make things make sense because you're not crazy. And that's one of the things I say, at the end of every show. I tell people, I say, you're not alone, you're not crazy, and you can heal from this. And then that's why I say you're not crazy, because they erode a person's sanity and a sense of reality with all of the lies and the manipulations and the gaslighting and all of it. So let me scroll down a little bit. Yeah. Rosario says, this is why I had to find answer when things were going bad. Gaslighting was the first bird's eye. Yes. Lisa says, mine called me crazy a lot. He would do it to me. Yet no other connection I have had felt that I'm crazy. He was the crazy one. His crazy made me crazy. Yes. Yep. That's what they do. And that's exactly what it is. It's, them having crazy behavior and then saying, well, you're being crazy. It's like, no, I'm not. You are. I mean, it's just, it's called crazy making behavior for a reason, because we're not showing the same reality with these people. I mean, they are in their own world, and you can't reason with a person. You can't use logic and reason with a person who's not logical or reasonable. But it's hard, again, like, it's hard to see because they kind of pop in and out of that reality. So they can be have like amazing communication up until they don't. And then things get like off in the rails, like they get off in the off track, and it's like, what? And it's confusing, but that's how that goes. Clara says, my mom always tells me that my disorganized nature is the root of all evil. Wow. I would practice. I know it's not easy because you're 16 and you're probably living at home. Observing. Okay, it's called like observe and not absorbing. So like, when she says stuff like that, just realizing she's just saying words. She's saying words that are designed to hurt and to, punish or to try to get you to be somehow different. And, that's not okay. It's not okay to talk to another person like that. Kelsey says, my abuser used my mental illness against me and told me I sped up our breakup with my anxiety. So they do that. And then a lot of people then feel like it's this mix of emotions of, oh no, did my issues cause the ending of this amazing relationship with my soulmate? Right? And that can take a lot of, that can be, take a while to kind of wrap your mind around. And there's a lot, again, like there's a lot of guilt and remorse, and then it kind of leads people into the scramble of like apologizing and begging and pleading and trying to make things right. And but it's not true, right? Claire says, I didn't realize how much a support group would help, to be honest. It's huge. It's huge. I have, our support group, the one we have on Facebook, is a little bit over 5,000 people now. And the one on my website is close to 2,000 people. And every single person that has come in there generally will say within like the first week, just wow. I mean, they're blown away. Just the validation that they're not alone, and that their situation and their circumstances are not like unique. Like you're not alone. You really are not alone in this. Like other people are going through very similar things, being told like eerily similar things, and kind of once you realize it, that you're not alone, and other people are hearing the exact, like, I mean, it's crazy, like word for word sometimes, like the exact same things. then it makes the behavior a lot easier to see, and you'll learn a lot of like coping strategies and everything. So Clara says, I only found your channel about 2 weeks ago and I'm already on the road to recovery. That's fantastic. And you're so young. Like, that's what's so awesome about that. So yes, please watch the red flag video. Please also watch the playlist on codependency, the red flags of codependency, because oftentimes what happens is when children, if you have a parent who's an emotional manipulator, then we often have really skewed boundaries because we've had to make our whole lives about our parent. And plus we've been being talked to and treated in a way that really skews our concept of like what's okay, right? So it's really important, like as you're dating and as you're getting older, to really have a good grip on what problematic behavior is, and kind of, if you have any unaddressed vulnerabilities or what I call empty buckets in your own life, so you can address that now, so you can hopefully avoid what a lot of us old folks in here have gone through. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm so blown away that people had the idea to even like YouTube narcissism or Google it or any of it. It took me forever to think to do that. So I am impressed, and I think it's awesome that you guys are, you're reaching out for resources. There's a lot of resources out there, and there's a lot of really great speakers on this topic. And like I'd mentioned before, different speakers, I think each of us brings something different to the table. So, we just find kind of who resonates with you, and don't be afraid don't be afraid to seek out new speakers, because like I said, everybody has a different perspective and a different take on it, and you never know when somebody's going to say like that one sentence that's just going to resonate, and it's going to give you a huge aha moment. Rosario says, we're talking about how amazing YouTube is and that she YouTubes everything. Yeah, I do too. Like I'm hooked on YouTube. I just love it. So Marie says, oh, she was dating a guy that was a narcissist. Her dating coach said he sounds like a narcissist. Then I had 2 more narc boyfriends, so I took you seriously. Yes. Vitastra said, I had no idea the word was narcissist. I just knew he was a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with a violent monster that no one saw but me. Yes. Dr. Cool says to Ryan, a healthy relationship, the person won't tell you that you're too sensitive. It's a way to manipulate. Yes. So if a person says to you, this hurt my feelings, right? Or, here they bring up some sort of issue, no matter what it is, right? A person that has, respect for the other person is going to take that seriously. Like, even if they don't agree, they're gonna appreciate that person's boundary. So, if I was joking around and said, oh, you're so dumb, and somebody said, hey, that really, like, that hurts my feelings, right? I wouldn't say, oh, you're being too sensitive. I would apologize. Because it is hurt. I mean, it hurt them. I mean, maybe I didn't intend for it to hurt them, right? I think emotional manipulators do intend oftentimes. But a normal person, if we cross somebody's boundary, we apologize. Then we take appropriate action, right, to remedy the wrong, because we're solutions oriented, we're team oriented, right? And then it doesn't happen again. So this is what I was talking about earlier. It's an event. It's not a pattern. If I was joking around and being, mean teasing, right? Which is really, it's passive aggressive is what that is. And I kept doing it. And you kept saying, hey, I don't like it when you joke like that. Then it's a pattern. Then that shows you through their actions that they're not sorry because they don't care enough to change their behavior. So Marky Mark says, Dana and the group has helped me out so much. Thank you. I am so glad. I am so glad for that. Really, the power is in the community. It really, really is. And it's awesome to see the aha moments people have in the support group and here and the discussions that we're able to have. I mean, it's just the internet is so cool. So Nora says, even when they apologize, it's not real. Yes. Yep. Yes. Clara says, I'm just surprised at how little empathy my narcissist has. It's astounding. Yes, it's jaw-dropping, isn't it? Like a lot of people, they talk about narcissists in terms of them wearing masks. And when their mask slips, like when their true self comes out, it can be terrifying because you realize this person is not a human being as we normally know human beings to be. Because you see that total lack of empathy, that total lack of just disregard, and that level of indifference for other people. It's just mind-boggling. It's jaw-dropping that level of darkness it can exist in a person. It's just unlike anything most people have ever seen. Codependent Warrior says, can you do another stream with Richard? I'm sure I can. I'll see if I can talk him into it. The time difference is a little difficult for him. But yeah, that would be fun. He's an interesting guy. My plan is, I've been emailing with both Melanie Tanya Evans and Ross Rosenberg to see about doing a joint video with them too in the near future. So I think that'll be fun. It's always interesting. Like I said, every speaker on this topic has a different take and different ideas and different information. And I don't think any one person has all the answers. I think it's just a bunch of different opinions and perspectives from a bunch of different people. And I think combined, that's where the power happens, Doug says, I am pleased that there have been no trolls this week. Me too. Rosario said, I called my narcissist out on not having empathy. Then he cried. Who is he kidding? Yeah, they do that. It's all a manipulation. It's like when you're dealing with the manipulative person, like everything they do is to manipulate. Like life to them is just like a giant game of chess. Like they're always a few moves ahead, and they're always plotting and planning and scheming and spinning things. It's crazy. Like even if the truth works better, they still lie. And like they're never sincere. And you just can't. I don't know. When a person lies, even once, right? Like if a person lies once, that's enough to question everything else. So it's, like again, like the foundation of a relationship is honesty and trust. And Performance asks, did anyone else's narcissist pull the illness card on you? Oh yeah. Yeah, mine did. Steve, when Steve left, he did the whole, totally like overly dramatic thing, upped and left with like no notice. And I had even said, if you, because we were not getting along. There were like some issues, not like major issues, but there were issues. And I had made the comment, if you feel like you need to move back, like that's okay. Just give me some notice. I didn't have a job. Like we just rented an apartment, all of this stuff. And then he staged this whole phone call saying it was from his son, and that his son, he just missed him so much and was crying. And and so he's like, I'm going to move back. And so like tomorrow. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was just so dramatic and unnecessary. And it was totally designed to create like maximum emotional impact. Ridiculous. And then I never thought I'd see him again, frankly, or hear from him again. Then he called me like maybe like 3 days later, said he was going into rehab, that he was an alcoholic and an addict, which was news to me, and that he would contact me when he got out. Then that was when his wife called me, like a few days after, maybe like a day or so after that, and then had said, he went back to her and, blah, like I meant nothing and blah, just all kinds of, she was manipulated too. So it was just, she was, saying a bunch of hurtful things because he was, provoking that. And then he did not realize that her and I were talking. And then he told me, okay, so he tells her, both of us, that he was an addict and an alcoholic. She pays for him to go to rehab. I told her, I said, I like didn't see, it like made like where did this come from? Like I didn't see, addict or alcoholic kind of behavior. So very strange. And then he was telling me, oh no, when he first left, he said he needed to go back. He missed his son, and that his ex-wife really did develop cancer, and that because he had cancer, he would never leave a person to go through that alone. So he was going to be there to like support and love, not love, but like to support her. But the whole time he was playing it like he was doing it as a friend, that she had played an important role in his life for a long time. And, because he was such a great guy. And I really fell into that thinking like, here's this amazing man who really wants to be a good father and a good, ex-husband. And like, why can't he just be with me? But all of that was a lie. She never had cancer. Like she never claimed to have cancer. It was just lie after lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. So crazy stuff. He was not an addict or an alcoholic. Just they lie. They lie. Okay, let's see. Rosario asks, what is the book Dana said to read out of all the books? Psychopath Free. It's a new revision. I can, when this live stream goes live, I can put a link to it down below for people that want to check it out. So, yeah, it's a really, really great book. Very validating. Like it's pretty crazy. So Peanuts Girl says, I basically ignored him. Now he keeps texting me. I guess he's trying to get a reaction, huh? Yes, and that's called hoovering. So I have a few videos. Like if you look on YouTube for hoovering, it describes more of what that is. And it's basically they're trying to reopen communication to, restart the relationship, basically. So it's, and this hoovering can happen at any time. So it normally happens within like the first month or first year after a relationship, but it can happen 10 years or 50 years later. So it's really important that we all anticipate that and have our emotional guard up at all times around these people, and to not kind of let nostalgia take over and think, oh, well, that was 20 years ago. Maybe they've changed. Like, no, like, just no contact, you know. Marky Mark says, Dana, do histrionic personality disorder people have empathy? That's a great question. I think so. The primary traits of a histrionic person is that they tend to be really dramatic. They tend to be very overly sexual. So, like, a good example of like a TV character that would be like histrionic would be Peg Bundy from Married with Children. So, somebody kind of along those lines. But any cluster B personality disorder, which is histrionic, borderline, narcissist, or antisocial, they all have like major issues. Like, just kind of the borderline. Because here's the thing. I kind of am on the fence with borderline. I think there's a lot of people that are misdiagnosed as borderline. They have poor emotional regulation. They are oftentimes suicidal. They, to me, that's more of like misdiagnosed trauma. This is just me personally speaking. But then there are those people that have borderline personality disorder that are very manipulative and they're very dramatic. To me, those are two very different like types of people. So when I talk about borderline personality being highly problematic, I'm talking more of the ones that are very manipulative and very triangulating and pot stirring and dramatic. There has been improvement. People see improvement with a therapy called DBT. It stands for dialectical behavioral therapy, with teaching kind of better emotional regulation, that kind of stuff. But if you're dealing with actually, like, kind of bottom line here, if you're dealing with the person who manipulates, or, other words for that would be like triangulating or lying or pot stirring or that kind of stuff, that's a real no-win situation, because that person can't be trusted. They're trying to gain power and control over another person or a situation. That's why people manipulate. So I would avoid that in general. In whatever way, shape, or form it comes across in your life, just avoiding manipulative people. So, yeah. Yeah, Kevin says, my understanding is that borderlines can heal somewhat. Narcs lack the ability. Yes, that's kind of the general consensus there. But really what it is it's, and why that is a lot of borderline, again, like, to me, I think there's two very different types of borderline type people. If a person lacks the self-awareness to realize that they have a problem, whatever that problem is, whether it's, narcissist personality disorder, or they could be antisocial personality disorder, they could have anorexia, or they could be an alcoholic. Doesn't matter. If whatever they've got going on, or they could have like chronic anxiety. I'm just using a whole bunch of A names that are popping into my mind. If they have these different disorders, but they lack the insight to realize that these are a problem, it doesn't matter if there's an effective treatment out there, because they're not going to seek it out because they don't think they have a problem. Most narcissists and sociopaths, they are not self-aware, and that's why they don't tend to change. So, with narcissism, that's on a spectrum. So if a person has like if they really realize like, hey, I've got some problematic behavior. Maybe I got this from a parent who was a narcissist, and I really want to work on changing this about myself. if they see that it's a problem and they're highly motivated to change it, then by all means, they can most likely change it, right? But if they're not motivated to change it, and too with again, it's a spectrum. If they're on that spectrum more of where like they don't have empathy or remorse, then they don't care. Like they do what they want to do. They don't care about their actions on other people, so they're not motivated to change. Marie says, so do they lack a soul? That's a big question. I think it depends on who you ask and how you define a soul. A lot, human beings that tend to lack empathy and lack remorse, it's not how we normally, understand human beings to be. So a lot of people tend to describe them in terms of, being the devil, being dark, being demonic, lacking a soul. Those are common words used to describe people that lack empathy and lack remorse. But I think then you've kind of got that whole like spiritual or philosophical debate about kind of what is a soul, and how would you measure that, and all that. Clara says, my biggest fear is becoming like my mother. But you know what though, Claire? Because that's your biggest fear, then you won't. Because it's going to be at the forefront of your mind all the time. And my guess would be, odds are, you'd probably be a really good mom. Because I think there's two types of role models that we have out there, right? And we have like people that role model behavior, right? And then we also have like role model good behavior, I should say. And then we have what I call reverse role models, people that role model really bad behavior. And so we can take away from that, realize the lessons of, this is everything that I don't want in my life, or that I don't want to be like, or that I don't want to do. So she says, how would I go about changing problematic behavior? I think bringing awareness to it. If you're aware of, and kind of doing that like honest, searching moral inventory of, because there's a term out there. It's not the most flattering term, but I think it can be very accurate. It's called fleas, like how a dog has fleas. If we grow up in a dysfunctional household, whatever reason it's dysfunctional, then it's thought that we pick up fleas, which are like bad behaviors. So like kind of a set of learned bad behaviors. And it can be difficult to get rid of fleas, but it can be done. So if you're aware of some of these bad behaviors that you have, so like, for example, I just lost my train of thought. If you grow up in a home where you've got a parent who, puts you down, right? And if you're like, that's problematic. Like, I don't want that in my life. Then making that conscious, concerted effort to not talk to other people like that. So a lot of it's going to be possibly breaking some bad habits, but then just being aware of like what you're doing right. And then here's the other thing too, is finding a role model that you think, you know what, I really like how she parents, or I really like the relationship that they have. Or if I were to be in a relationship or a marriage, I would like this dynamic. And finding and seeking out what's healthy and just kind of observing that. So, yeah. So there's role models, and then there's reverse role models. And I think just because, we're born into a family with a parent that's got some major issues, it's not a curse. It's not, that there's no hope. It's just, it's bringing awareness to it. The fact that I mean, my goodness, the fact that you're 16, that you have this level of awareness that your mother has problematic behavior, that you don't want to be the same way, that you have so much insight and you're so young. Like, so many people are in therapy for years and decades, even trying to figure out what's wrong, like why their life isn't working. So you have a ton of clarity, you know? And again, like, I think the more you can read about this, the more education that you can do as far as other issues that daughters of narcissistic mothers have. It's probably going to bring a lot of other stuff to light for you. So you'll be able to see, like, oh, you know what? I never thought that that was problematic. But now that I think about it, or now that it was brought to my attention, yeah, I can see, kind of see more of like what's going on. So super insightful from, hearing from other people that have been there, done that. Kevin says, when I was 16, I thought my mother represented all women. Yeah, I I think that's true for most people, right? It's like we tend to think our dad, like most men are like our dad and most women are like our mom, and kind of treat them accordingly. KYP says, I attract a lot of narcissists. And I think there's a lot of them out there. I would encourage you, though, to, examine your empty buckets. So I did a video list called Red Flags of Codependency. That video is in there. It's video number 1, which is love bombing. Out of all of the videos that I've done so far, that I think is my favorite video. I think it's just really, really helpful. It's a lot of the major lessons that I've learned in my life that I think are major lessons that a lot of people are struggling with in their life. I don't think I'm alone in that. So with attracting narcissists, here's the other thing to that, is it's not so much like who we attract in our life, it's who we keep in our life. So, like, I attract the whole range. Like, I think most people do. And it is what it is. And so, I don't take offense to it if I have some skeezy guy hitting on me or whatever. I just, like, problematic behavior, like, no way, get out of here. And then I just distance myself. I get out of that situation. So he might be attracted to me. I'm not attracted to that. And I don't keep that in my life. I don't keep problematic behavior in my life. So I would encourage you to examine not only, like, who's attracted to you, because that, that's, if you're, people are attracted to people for different reasons, but like, who are you attracted to, and are you keeping them in your life? Let's see. Clara says, thankfully my crazy family is so crazy that I was able to see that there is something off about it. Yeah. Well, that's good, because for a lot of people, that level of crazy is just their normal, because we tend to be our own baseline for normal. And that's what I think takes a lot of people a long time to seek out therapy or a support group or a book or answers. They just kind of know that their life's not working the way that they want it to work, and they can't figure out why. Lisa says, I fell hook, line, and sinker for the love bombing. Most of us do. I mean, it's if you don't know that it's problematic, it's very intoxicating. When a person's telling you everything that you would ever want to hear, that you think this only happens in the movies, it's really like, it's too good to be true, because it is. Let's see. Marky Mark says, is histrionic personality disorder common with men? I don't know the statistics on that. Part personally speaking, I haven't, like, as a nurse that works with people with personality disorders, I haven't seen, I don't know if I've ever seen that with men. It's not a very commonly diagnosed personality disorder, to be honest. I think, and frankly, neither is narcissistic personality disorder. People, from what I've experienced, they tend to kind of get, women tend to be more diagnosed as borderline, and men tend to be diagnosed as antisocial. I can't think of any women, frankly, that I've come across that have been diagnosed as antisocial. I have come across a handful of men that have been diagnosed as borderline. But again, I think those guys, it tends to be unaddressed trauma, because when people tend to do like injurious type behaviors like cutting, or other types of like, the scarification or burning themselves, or, suicide attempts, those kinds of things, they tend to get the label of borderline personality disorder. But yeah, it's narcissism and histrionic isn't used a whole lot. And frankly, okay, so Lisa's saying mine was diagnosed as antisocial. A lot of what we're talking about, a lot of what I talk about on my website is more of antisocial traits. So, and the reason I don't differentiate, because for me, it's sort of like trying to figure out if you're, what kind of poison you're drinking. Is it bleach or is it strychnine? Like, doesn't, frankly, for our purposes, it really doesn't matter. As long as it's toxic. If a person's toxic, that's all we need to know in order to get away from them. But narcissists tend to be, they are so blindingly selfish that that's what's abusive about them, is their blinding degree of selfish behavior. It's all about them. There's no empathy or remorse because it's all about them. They don't tend to, use and exploit people. Sociopaths, antisocials exploit other people. They have a pattern of using and abusing people, and it's definitely a lot more calculated. Narcissists just lack self-awareness. Sociopaths tend to have the self-awareness. Narcissists really tend to they're more of the overt ones. They don't apologize. They're selfish. They're grandiose. They're egotistical. Sociopaths have the self-awareness to know that they'd be better off, they're superficially charming. They're, they say what they need to say. A narcissist won't say what they need to say oftentimes. They think they're always right. So there's no budging with them. The reason, but again, the core issue with sociopaths, with psychopaths, with a lot of histrionic kind of stuff, it's a blinding degree of selfishness. It's just on that spectrum of problematic. So I don't differentiate, because I think a lot of people get caught up in trying to figure out what they're, and it's understandable, right? What they're dealing with. Is this person a narcissist, or are they a sociopath, or are they a borderline, or and that can keep a person stuck in a toxic situation for a long time, because they're trying to figure out, again, understandably so, what they're dealing with. But getting an accurate diagnosis, getting this person to get in for a diagnosis, is a challenge within itself. But then if they're highly manipulative, and if you're going to a clinician that is not really highly trained with dealing with manipulative people, it's easy for a master manipulator to manipulate the situation, and the therapist, and the clinician. So and I'm gonna sign off here because it is after midnight. Oh my gosh. So let's see, lots of great questions. We got a really good turnout for this live stream. And for those of you that are new here, just so you know, the chat, I don't know how long y'all go on this, but I think the chat goes for quite a while. So feel free to stay here and chat as long as you want. And if you're interested in joining either one of my support groups, all my info is on the About tab of my YouTube page. So, yes, yes. My group on YouTube, on Facebook, is called Healing After Narcissistic Abuse. Just FYI. And my website is called thriveafterabuse.com. People are laughing at us that we are still here. Yes, I know. We've been here for like 6 days. I've got to sign off and go to bed because I will turn into a pumpkin. It's the truth. So, you guys take care. Thank you again for all your participation, for your fantastic questions, for your support of each other. It's amazing. It's awesome to see. And as always, lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I will see you guys next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Okay, bye.